On a high-rise building, the left wrist wrapped simply in rags was still oozing with blood. Ho Jun looked down with resentful eyes as Wang Mingyang and others were heading towards the shopping mall. What kind of bastard dares to cut off my hand? I will definitely make you pay the price. Sun Jia must have died. A few minutes ago, Sun Jia's screams attracted many zombies, and Ho Jun guessed that he would not survive. That's fine. With the old man's character, he will definitely be furious if he kills his son. Now we need to find the old man as soon as possible. These 4 people are extremely powerful. I can't deal with them alone. Ho Jun snorted coldly and dissipated into a black smoke. Wang Mingyang and the other 4 observed the situation, chose to avoid the group of corpses in the square, and moved towards the left side of the mall. After a while, the 4 people entered the mall through the emergency passage, and what they saw was corpses all over the ground. Y8. Apparently, Sun Jia and his group gathered in the shopping mall, and a lot of zombies inside were cleared away. Wang Mingyang and the others immediately discovered that there were many naked corpses among the corpses, which made several people feel a sense of gloom. Everyone didn't bother to search and climbed directly to the 5th floor. The mall was very big, and they could only look along the shops one by one. After walking around a corner, Wang Mingyang saw a shop not far away. There were 4 gangsters at the door, sitting on the guardrail with machetes and laughing. Stop! Who are you? One of the gangsters looked up and saw Wang Mingyang and 4 others approaching. He immediately stood up and pointed his machete directly at the 4 of them. Hearing this, the other 3 gangsters turned their heads to take a look, and they all stood up in a hurry. Kill him! Wang Mingyang was too lazy to talk and directly ordered Su Yu and Mu Ningxue. The 2 women gritted their teeth and fired several ice picks and a blade. 2 of the 4 gangsters on the opposite side had awakened their powers, but the fireballs and wooden thorns they fired were instantly broken. After several screams, the 4 gangsters fell to the ground one after another. When the women in the store heard the commotion, they all struggled to climb up to the glass display window and looked out. Wang Mingyang led the 3 of them to the shop. The scene inside instantly made Su Yu and Mu Ningxue cover their mouths. I saw a dozen naked women, covered in bruises and covered in dust, just like the homeless people on the roadside. Seeing that all 4 gangsters outside were killed, the women suddenly laughed strangely. Gradually, the sly laughter turned into crying. Wang Mingyang silently unlocked the door and walked in slowly. This was originally a Western restaurant with many sofa seats inside. Normally it should be very clean and tidy. But now, these sofa seats are all dirty and messy. The women were lying next to the window, crying without caring about their nakedness. With a sigh, Wang Mingyang pulled Liu Chan out. Su Yu and Mu Ningxue stood at the door with dull eyes. They were dressed in neat clothes, with rosy and fair skin, and even exuded a faint fragrance of facial cleanser. Compared with the naked and tortured women inside. One heaven, one hell. Tears fell in large drops, and Su Yu and Mu Ningxue finally understood why Wang Mingyang said, "Death may also be a kind of relief. What is more terrible than death is life worse than death. Aren't these women worse off than dead?" After an unknown amount of time, Wang Mingyang and Liu Chan stood in the corridor, smoking cigarette butts all over the floor. The zombies in the entire shopping mall had been cleared away by Sun Jia and his group, and even the door on the 1st floor was blocked with debris. The crying sound on the 5th floor attracted many zombies to gather, but they never came in. "Blessings, immeasurable heavenly Lord Boss Wang, how do you plan to arrange these people?" Liu Chan recited the honorary title and asked Wang Mingyang in a low voice. Wang Mingyang took a long breath and sneered. "Arrangements? Why should I arrange them? This?" Liu Chan was a little dumbfounded, and then fell silent again. "Yu Chan, don't overestimate our abilities." Wang Mingyang called his name seriously, instead of the nickname he had been joking about. "None of these women have awakened their powers. I guess those who have awakened their powers must have been killed by Sun Jia. To survive in this apocalypse, everyone must reflect their own value. These people have no value to me. We ourselves don't dare to say that we have nothing to worry about. If we bring a group of ordinary people with us, aren't we asking for death? Wang Mingyang patted Liu Chan on the shoulder and spoke calmly. So, are you willing to take me with you because I am valuable? Liu Chan suddenly turned around to face Wang Mingyang and asked word for word. You are my good friend and brother. This is priceless. Wang Mingyang looked at the serious Liu Chan in front of him and suddenly grinned. Hey! I knew you wouldn't let me down! Liu Chan raised his hand and punched Wang Mingyang on the shoulder, smiling. But Suyu and Mu Ningxue, what is their value? Ahem. Liu Chan's question caught Wang Mingyang off guard, choking on his cigarette and coughing non-stop. After a long while, Wang Mingyang regained his composure and looked at the two girls who were standing at the door, bewildered. They each have their own value. Generally speaking, they have the potential to become strong, and I need their potential. Liu Chan's eyes moved slightly. In fact, he had always been curious about Wang Mingyang's relationship with these two girls. But after a few days of getting along, it was clear that it was not the intimacy he imagined. Wang Mingyang's words made him more sure that this brother who had known each other for a short time seemed to have some kind of pressure deep in his heart. In the future, we will face various powerful opponents. But Lei Bao, believe me, at least so far, we should be the strongest group of people. If I meet the right person, I will definitely join the team. But these women in front of me are not suitable for. Wang Mingyang patted his shoulder and smiled lightly. I understand. Liu Chan nodded slightly. He knew very well that Wang Mingyang did not accept those with supernatural powers he met in the dormitory of Yunnan college students, let alone these women who had not awakened their supernatural powers until now. Wang Mingyang walked forward, and with a wave of his hand, dozens of sets of clothes collected from the supermarket appeared, as well as a lot of food and drinking water, all falling on the corridor. Suyu, Mu Ningxue, you two please arrange for them to put on clothes. Bao Bao, you come with me downstairs, and we'll collect some things. Wang Mingyang woke them up, waved to Liu Chan, and they walked towards the commodity area downstairs. Suyu and Mu Ningxue woke up from a dream, tentatively walked into the house, comforted the women softly, and pointed to the clothes on the corridor. Wang Mingyang and Liu Chan quickly went downstairs, collecting various high-end products into the mustard space along the way. The first to third floors of the entire shopping mall are filled with various fashions, cosmetics, and electronic products, while the fourth to sixth floors are food areas. No one would bother them at this moment, and the two of them started happily shopping for 0 yuan. Wang Mingyang and Liu Chan had not finished confiscating the supplies on the third floor when several muffled sounds suddenly came from one side of the mall, causing a commotion among the corpses outside. The two of them looked around and couldn't help but let out a sigh. Supreme Tai saves Ku Tianzuan. It's good to be liberated. Your Majesty's pardon, I will surpass your lonely soul. Liu Chan recited the honorary title in a low voice and muttered words. Wang Mingyang knew that he was saving the souls of the dead. Liu Chan in his previous life would recite this Taoist rebirth mantra every time he encountered such a thing. Over time, Wang Mingyang also knew something. I'm here to rescue everyone and be rescued urgently. After reciting the incantation, Liu Chan bowed and then straightened up and spread the seal. Let's go. Wang Mingyang called out softly and continued to collect supplies. Half an hour later, the two finally collected all the supplies from the first to the third floor and returned to the fifth floor. A dozen women sat against the wall in the corridor, holding food and water in their hands and devouring them. Seeing the two people approaching, the women couldn't help but slow down their movements. Brother Mingyang, just now, 5 girls committed suicide. Suyu stood up and looked at Wang Mingyang with a hint of crying and red eyes. Mu Ningxue's eyes were also red, but she bit her red lips stubbornly and said nothing. I heard it. Wang Mingyang nodded gently and wiped the tears from the corners of Suyu's eyes. There are 2 corpses hanging outside the window. They are the boyfriends of 2 of the girls. They... Suyu continued. Wang Mingyang rubbed her head and said softly, Well, I'll deal with it. Walking along the corridor to the side of the mall, Wang Mingyang poked his head out of the open window, and 2 male corpses were hung with curtains below. With a slight swing of the sword, the curtains were cut directly, the oxygen control ability was activated, and 2 exploding fireballs directly hit the 2 male corpses that fell. The violent explosion of flames rose up and directly ignited the zombies several meters around the body. Wang Mingyang returned to the corridor of the store and took the 3 of them with him. He walked to the next door and sat down. There was a large round table inside, and 4 people sat around the table. After seeing this, will you still feel bad about how many people you killed? Wang Mingyang looked at Suyu and Mu Ningxue, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. I can't wait to cut them into pieces. Suyu gritted his teeth and stabbed the horizontal knife in his hand into the floor. Mu Ningxue's eyes were cold. Killing this kind of scum even 100 times is not enough. If we encounter them again, I will personally send them to hell. The 2 women were full of murderous intent, and the tragic experiences of the dozen women completely subverted their cognition. It also made the 2 of them understand that if Wang Mingyang hadn't taken them all the way, I'm afraid that in this apocalyptic world, their fate would not be much better than that of the women outside. What is more terrible than death is that life is worse than death. It's good to have this kind of awareness. In the end of the world, if you are soft-hearted, you may be the one who is miserable. Wang Mingyang nodded. These 2 women finally realized that they were in the end of the world. Brother Mingyang, these girls. Suyu hesitated. Mu Ningxue was very direct. Wang Mingyang, what are you going to do with these dozen girls? First of all, I can't take them with me. As soon as he finished speaking, Suyu's face became anxious. Just as he was about to open his mouth, Wang Mingyang stopped him. Secondly, we have offended Sun Jian. Although he can't find us for the time being, Spring City is so big and we will always meet. With these women, it's not us who are in danger but them. Do you understand? Following Wang Mingyang's calm analysis, Suyu's eyes quickly dimmed. Of course, if they still have the desire to live, then I will definitely give them some help. After Wang Mingyang finished speaking, he took out 4 bottles of mineral water from the mustard seed space, put them on the tea table, opened a bottle of water and drank it. How can I help? Just tell me. When Suyu and Mu Ningxue heard this, their eyes lit up and they asked hurriedly without drinking water. None of them have awakened their powers, right? Mu Ningxue shook her head. No, several people who had awakened their powers before were killed by this group of people. It's the same as I guessed, but I think there is a way that we can try. Maybe it can help them awaken their powers. Wang Mingyang put down the water bottle and said calmly. Suyu. What? Is there such a way? Mu Ningxue. Is there a way to awaken people's superpowers? Li Yuchan. Are you kidding? Do I seem to like joking? Wang Mingyang said speechlessly. Picture. The 3 of them said in unison, then looked at each other and smiled. Okay, don't interrupt. I'll go talk to them later after they finish eating. Wang Mingyang waved his hand and placed a few bags of food on the table. The 4 of them took a short rest, and then Wang Mingyang ordered Suyu to bring these women over. Seeing Suyu come out, the girls who had finished eating struggled to get up. After a while, Suyu walked in with the remaining 14 women. He motioned for everyone to sit down. There were many tables, chairs and benches in the hall of this shop. The girls did not dare to stop and sat around one after another. Even after going through so much suffering, you still want to live, right? Wang Mingyang stood up and looked calmly at the 14 women in front of him who were covered in scars and torture. The girls looked at each other sadly, looking at each other speechlessly, but they still nodded silently. If you want to survive, you can only rely on yourself. Don't expect us to take you away. Wang Mingyang then said coldly that he could help a little, but he couldn't be a burden. But none of us have ever killed zombies. There are so many out there. A woman in her mid-20s with bruised eyes said in a low voice. Yeah, I'm not afraid of death anymore, but I don't want to die so unclearly. A young girl in her 20s, with red eyes and gritted teeth. Sister Mei Hong, in order to save me from suffering, she took the initiative to mess with that scumbag. She had already jumped just now, and I will work hard to survive for her. A little girl of 16 or 17 years old wiped the tears from her eyes and said firmly. The girls nodded one after another. Having experienced this kind of hell on earth, they felt as if they had died once. At this moment, I didn't end it on my own. Maybe it was because of some obsession in my heart. Or maybe you simply don't want to die. No matter what, as long as they want to live. Very well, as long as you want to live. I can give you the power to live. Wang Mingyang nodded, glanced around the women present, and said loudly. As long as you can give me strength, my life is yours. Me too. Me too. We are all the same. The girls spoke one after another, and there seemed to be a little light in their dead eyes. You have to think clearly. If you want to obtain this kind of power, you may need to pay the price of life. Wang Mingyang was unmoved. He didn't need the lives of these women. But with that method, not everyone can awaken as they wish, and they may actually die. Death? What does that matter? We've all died once. I'm not afraid of death. The women looked miserable, but no one flinched. If you can gain strength, why should you fear death? Seeing how determined these women were, Wang Mingyang stopped talking nonsense. Pretend to walk to the next door and come back with a backpack. He opened his backpack and grabbed 14 first-order crystal nuclei from it, scattering them on the round table. Looking at the crystal-clear crystal core on the table, these women were a little confused. But 2 or 3 of the women had strange looks on their faces. Apparently, they had seen these things before. These crystal nuclei are all dug out from the zombies' heads. If you want to gain power, everyone comes up and takes one. I will teach you how to absorb it in a moment. Before that, as I said before, these crystal nuclei may allow you to awaken your powers and gain strength. But its absorption process will be accompanied by tremendous pain. The result of not being able to bear it is, you will explode and die. Wang Mingyang pointed to the crystal core on the table and said calmly, there is indeed a chance of awakening supernatural powers by absorbing the crystal core, but the process is extremely painful. Those who cannot bear it will die on the spot. The crystal nuclei of ordinary zombies are equally effective, but the probability is 1 in 10. Now that he has decided to help these poor women, Wang Mingyang doesn't want to be a villain in vain. What's the point of a dozen or so people, and only 1 or 2 left in the end? It's just a matter of death. There's nothing to hesitate about. I'll go first. The girl in her 20s stood up and walked over, grabbing a crystal core casually. The other girls also stood up immediately and grabbed a crystal core in their hands. Okay. Now that you have made your choice, I will tell you what to do next. Wang Mingyang nodded, stood up and led the girls to the corridor. Stay 3 meters apart from each other and find a place to sit down. The corridor of the shopping mall was extremely spacious. 14 women sat in a row and looked up at Wang Mingyang. Hold the crystal core in your hand, let your mind go, and imagine that there is energy in the crystal core, flowing into your body along your arm. No matter how painful it is, you must grit your teeth and persevere. If you can't hold on, then you have no choice but to die. Wang Mingyang's voice, with a hint of spiritual power, seemed to ring in the minds of the girls, and they all began to close their eyes and meditate. Boss Wang, is this really useful? Seeing that all the girls closed their eyes and started trying, Wang Mingyang led the 3 of them back several meters. Li Yuchan approached him and asked in a low voice. I don't know, but this is the only way I can think of that might work. Wang Mingyang shook his head. This method is actually feasible. The awakening potion in the previous life purified the energy in the crystal core so that ordinary people could awaken supernatural powers. But that potion is too mild and does not fully exploit the human body's potential. People who awaken their abilities through this potion can reach the highest level of achievement, which is the 6th level. You can awaken by directly absorbing crystal nuclei, but the probability is too low. Even for first-order crystal nuclei, it is only a 50-50 situation. Most people will not be able to bear the pain like thousands of ants gnawing at their bones, and will eventually fail and explode to death. Wang Mingyang was not sure how well the 14 women in front of him could survive. Why do we absorb crystal nuclei without any pain? How did I know? Li Yuchan looked suspicious. Then how do you know they will be in agony if they absorb the crystal core? It's written in the novel, and you haven't seen it. Aren't those people who turned into zombies have distorted faces and look like crazy? Wang Mingyang's back was slightly chilled, and a cold sweat broke out instantly. TCH, you dare to be so sensational based on what is written in the novel? Li Yuchan silently gestured with his middle finger, followed closely by Su Yu and Mu Ningxue. Wang Mingyang curled his lips speechlessly, but secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It was so dangerous, I almost lost my life. 10 minutes passed, and finally, the crystal cores in the hands of two girls began to glow, and an invisible energy surged into their bodies along the palms of their hands. Hey! Something has changed. Li Yuchan had been observing these women with his mental power, and couldn't help but feel happy when he saw them. This is just the beginning, the next step is the most dangerous. Wang Mingyang sighed. The energy contained in the crystal core is directly injected into the body, which is extremely dangerous for people who have not awakened their own powers and have been strengthened. 20 minutes later, all 14 women began the step of absorbing the crystal nuclei. The first few women who were absorbed had distorted faces, and their teeth were bleeding from biting them, but they still held back and remained silent. Seeing this scene, Wang Mingyang couldn't help but nodded. These women who have experienced hell have stronger spirits and wills than ordinary people. For 30 minutes, the 14 women were trembling all over and looking pale. The youngest ones couldn't help but start roaring. Cherry! Hold on! Don't forget, you have to live for Sister Mei Hong! The 20-year-old girl opened her bloodshot eyes, stared at the 16-year-old girl Cherry who kept screaming, and shouted hysterically. This girl was also the one who first started to absorb the crystal core. As she shouted, all the women began to shout angrily and cheer each other up desperately. Seeing this scene, Wang Mingyang's iron-hard heart was slightly moved. Su Yu and Mu Ningxue even covered their mouths tightly, with incomparable respect in their eyes. Blessings and immeasurable heavenly Lord! Supreme Tai saves Ku Tianzuan! Li Yuchan held his hand to pray for blessings from God, silently praying for these miserable women. 1 hour. 2 hours. It was not until more than 2 hours later that these women stopped struggling one after another. Their throats had already lost their voices an hour ago. Waves of energy fluctuations emerged from their bodies, and various powers such as fire, frost, sand, and vines began to emerge. It's a pity that even if they are as determined as they are, 2 of them will never be able to stand up again. Wang Mingyang and Li Yuchan walked forward silently, gently picked up the 2 women who were bleeding from their orifices and had no breath, and put them aside. He took out 2 packs of wet wipes from the space and handed them to Su Yu and Mu Ningxue. The 2 girls took it silently and knelt down to wipe their remains. When the energy fluctuations calmed down, the 12 women who had collapsed on the ground slowly opened their eyes. The girl in her 20s struggled to her feet. A blade of wind appeared in her palm, and she raised her hand and waved it towards the opposite fence. The wind blade made a faint scream and cut through the fence cleanly, leaving a deep mark on the wall of the shop. This is the power of wind? The girl murmured to herself, looking at her palms in disbelief. I am flame. Mine is frost. My is speed. My power is so strong. The girls stood up one after another and tried to use the energy in their bodies. For a time, all kinds of powers were flying, and the wall of the shop opposite experienced a violent bombardment and collapsed. There are 12 women, 6 of the elemental type, 4 of the strengthening type, 1 of the transformation type, and there is actually an awakened person of the spiritual type. And the transformation type awakened person can directly turn his hands into a pair of sharp wings. Although he can't fly yet, he can shoot out feathers like steel knives. After testing their powers, the girls discovered that there were 2 sisters lying on the side. They all put away the powers in their hands, gathered around silently, and all knelt down on the ground, crying silently. Wang Mingyang and the other 4 also moved out of the way, standing in the distance, and watching them quietly without disturbing them any more. After a while, the girl who had awakened the wind power wiped her tears, got up and walked over. My name is Ronlan. Thank you for your kindness. There is no way to repay a great kindness. From now on, whenever the benefactor calls, the 12 of us will go through fire and water, no matter what. Ronlan knelt on the ground and kowtowed deeply. The other women stood up one after another, led by Ronlan, and knelt down. Wang Mingyang looked at these women in front of him, as if he had returned from hell and been reborn from the ashes. With a slight sigh, Wang Mingyang stepped forward to help Ronlan and called the other girls up. That's all I can help you with. You'll have to walk your own path in the future. I have no requirements for you, just live well. Wang Mingyang looked at the girls, turned around and walked into the store, putting away his backpack. With a wave of his hand, large quantities of food and drinking water appeared in the store. These supplies are enough for 12 of them to consume for 10 days. Seeing that it was getting late outside, Wang Mingyang thought for a moment, and took out a large piece of titanium alloy from the mustard space. Back in the corridor, Wang Mingyang activated his metal control ability, and sharp horizontal knives quickly took shape. Su Yu! Wang Mingyang shouted low, and Su Yu immediately understood. The dark flame ability was activated, and the dark red flame began to burn these horizontal knives. The horizontal knives quickly turned red, and traces of black lines spread on them. After inserting all the horizontal knives in the corridor, Wang Mingyang nodded with satisfaction. The supplies inside and these weapons are left for you. After awakening your powers, don't forget to practice your close combat skills. Maybe I can save your life one day. I'll leave those zombies outside the mall for you to practice. Don't forget to dig out the crystal cores in the zombies' heads. Those are the resources for you to continue to grow stronger. After Wang Mingyang finished speaking, he waved to Su Yu and the others, then turned and left. Benefactor, we don't know your name yet. Ronlan saw this and shouted quickly. My name is Wang Mingyang. Wang Mingyang paused slightly and spat out a few words without looking back. Thank you so much for your benefactor. I hope you will cherish it. Ronlan did not dare to stay any longer, but took the other 11 people and knelt on the ground again. Wang Mingyang waved his hand, and the 4 figures quickly disappeared around the corner of the corridor. It wasn't until Wang Mingyang and others appeared on one side of the square that Ronlan and others slowly stood up. Looking at the 12 horizontal knives with strange black lines still stuck in the corridor, the girls had mixed feelings for a while. Ronlan, what should we do next? The older woman stepped forward and asked Ronlan. Because of Ronlan's performance, they couldn't help but take Ronlan as the main one at this moment. Night is not suitable for fighting. Let's have a good night's rest. Tomorrow, we will go kill zombies. Ronlan looked at the horizontal knife on the floor, which was still radiating high temperature. Although that Sun Jie is dead, he still has parents who are high officials. If it weren't for their protection, this Sun Jie would have died long ago. How could our suffering happen? If they are not dead yet, that's good, we will send them down with our own hands. When Su Yu and Mu Ningxue comforted them, they had already told them that the demon Sun Jie had been crushed to ashes. Moreover, in the past few days, the girls also knew who Sun Jie was from the chats of those gangsters from time to time. Yes, we have to live. Keep this life and send all these demons to hell. Yes, live. Revenge. All this rubbish deserves to die. Ronlan's words caused all the girls to speak out, their words full of hatred, and the overwhelming murderous intention permeated them. Wang Mingyang and the others retrieved the off-road vehicle, quickly cleared a road, and headed straight back to the villa area. Along the way, everyone was silent. What happened today really had a huge impact on Su Yu and the others. Let them clearly realize for the first time that they are already in the end of the world, and the goodness of human nature has not yet been seen. But the evil of human nature has been fully demonstrated. Wang Mingyang was too lazy to speak. If he hadn't felt it in his heart, and those women were indeed strong-willed and could be considered talents, he wouldn't have put so much thought into it. Moreover, ignoring these women would make Liu Chan and the others think that he was too cold-blooded and ruthless. With this view, it's easy for cracks to appear in the team. It's better to put down a chess piece conveniently, maybe it will work wonders one day. Judging from the looks of the 12 women when they parted, they indeed regarded Wang Mingyang as a benefactor, but Wang Mingyang didn't know how long this kind of gratitude could last. There are too many things about rising rice and grudges. However, it doesn't matter. If it hinders me, I can just erase it. Wang Mingyang thought to himself that although the abilities of these 12 girls were good, they were basically C-level, while Rong Lan and the girl from the transformation department should be B-level. But it's nothing. His strength is improving faster and faster, and he has no fear at all. The off-road vehicle sped to the villa area. The sun had already set, and the villa area was dark. After a few more minutes, the off-road vehicle finally returned to the mansion. The door was intact, which made the 4 of them feel at ease. Parking the off-road vehicle in the underground garage, Wang Mingyang was still thinking about whether he should find a building materials market tomorrow when he got out of the car. Otherwise, even if there is a backup generator, there will be no way to light the lights at night. There are too many windows in the villa. If light shines in the darkness, it will attract many mutant creatures. Then I won't be able to sleep well at night. Wang Mingyang asked Su Yu and the others to go upstairs first, then walked to the underground storage room and transferred some of the materials collected in the supermarket. So that every time he cooks, he needs to take out supplies from the mustard space. This is also more convenient. Even if he is not here, others can pick it up if they need it. Turn on the backup generator. The noise of this silent generator is indeed very small. But Wang Mingyang still made several layers of metal mesh to seal it, and tried to weaken the sound of the silent generator as much as possible while ensuring ventilation. When collecting supplies later, you can pay attention to the sound insulation materials and then renovate them. Back in the hall, the lights were brightly lit, and the 3 of them were sitting there bored. I'll seal the windows in your room. Wang Mingyang curled his lips and went upstairs alone, leaving the 3 of them there laughing quietly. Use the metal from the mustard space to seal up the windows of the 4-person house to ensure that no light can shine through. Only then did Wang Mingyang shout with satisfaction from the 2nd floor, and the 3 of them quickly ran up. The water source in this villa seems to come from a mountain spring somewhere, and it is still supplied to this day. Several people quickly cut off all the lights in the hall and courtyard, leaving only the power in 4 rooms. Only then did everyone feel relieved and went back to their houses to take a rare hot bath. Wang Mingyang was the fastest. He came out wearing a t-shirt and shorts and walked to the roof of the villa. The terrace is very large and equipped with various leisure facilities. There are parasols, deck chairs, a small pool on one side, and a pavilion on the corner of the terrace. Wang Mingyang walked to the pavilion and looked down the mountain at the villa area. It was dim upon entering, and occasionally a few low roars of zombies could be heard, adding a bit of a terrifying atmosphere to this quiet villa area. Thinking back to the afternoon battle, Wang Mingyang felt a surge of pride in his heart. The energy in the body surged, and the energy of the 2nd lotus seed had just been digested. But Wang Mingyang still felt a little worse, and then a crystal core with a light golden luster appeared. This is the crystal core of the 3rd order mutant Rat King. Wang Mingyang grabbed it in his hand, became energetic and began to absorb energy crazily. As the 3rd order gold system crystal nuclei turn into powder, they scatter in the wind. A barrier suddenly shattered. Promoted to the 3rd level, Wang Mingyang couldn't help but look up to the sky and roar. Even though it would attract mutant creatures, he couldn't help but feel happy in his heart. His 3rd level is not comparable to that of ordinary superpowers. In terms of mental strength, energy reserves, and physical fitness improvements, Wang Mingyang's 3rd level gold content is at least 10 times that of ordinary 3rd level superpowers. As his roar spread, bursts of chaotic roars suddenly came from the villa area below the mountain. Suddenly, hundreds of zombies ran out from various villas and rushed towards the mountain. Wang Mingyang chuckled, exerted force on his feet, and jumped directly from the balcony of the villa. The metal gate melted quickly and turned into steel spears, which flew up together and followed behind him like shooting stars. Wang Mingyang's body flashed sharply, bringing out an afterimage, and rushed down the mountain. On the campus of Yunnan University, in the laboratory building of the School of Life Sciences, the barrels of 2 heavy machine guns were red and smoke was slowly rising. At the feet of the 2 soldiers, yellow bullet casings were piled on the ground, directly submerging their ankles. In the small square outside the experimental building, corpses of various zombies piled up like mountains. Gong Zhan spent nearly a whole day, together with 2 first-order warriors who had just awakened and piled up crystal cores, and several speed-enhanced awakeners among the college student survivors. Attracted all the zombies that could be attracted on the campus of Yunnan University. Gao Yang and Tianlei's 2 Earth-type superpowers built a large circle of high walls around the small square to the opposite hillside, directly including all the nearly 20,000 zombies. The 2 heavy machine guns kept firing. The barrels turned red and were cooled down by the water superpower before firing again. It was repeated 3 times, and with the help of the rifles of the surrounding soldiers and the help of some college students with supernatural powers, it took nearly 2 hours to kill all the zombies in the wall. Everyone collapsed to the ground from exhaustion, and then a few warriors led other melee power users in to collect the crystal cores. Despite this, everyone is still cautious. With such an intensive attack, some zombies must not be completely dead. It wasn't until the sun set that all these zombie crystal nuclei were collected. The soaring smell of blood continued to spread to the surroundings along with the breeze. 20,000 zombies collected a total of more than 3,000 crystal nuclei of various types. Gong Zhan was not stingy and directly gave 30 pills to each of the students and teachers present. Despite this, Gong Zhan still harvested more than 2,000 crystal nuclei. It can be said to be the biggest gain since the zombie outbreak. Tianlei and his party took the crystal core and retreated directly. Director Hong and the 4 others still wanted to entangle, but Gong Zhan sternly refused. Seeing that Gong Zhan showed no mercy at all, Director Hong and the other 2 had no choice but to leave with the crystal core. Gong Zhan quickly arranged for the soldiers to bring Gu Zemin out of the underground research room. 4 helicopters landed one after another in the cleared space in the small square, and the few remaining scientific research instruments were quickly moved into one of the aircraft. Gu Zemin looked back at the laboratory building where he had lived for most of his life, sighed helplessly, turned around and boarded the plane. The helicopters took off quickly one by one, forming a formation and flying towards the military area shelter far outside the city. The strong smell of blood filled the air, and gradually, shadowy mutated creatures appeared all around. There were even a group of mutated insects swarming in, and the whole small square started a feast of mutated creatures. The night was getting darker, and mutated creatures advanced from time to time in the entire small square. Zombies also came one after another. They would not eat corpses of the same kind. But those mutated creatures are a kind of delicacy in their eyes, and the battle between zombies and mutated creatures begins. Time was so tight that Gong Zhan had no time to arrange for someone to burn the body, so he had to leave quickly. I'm afraid Gong Zhan and the others didn't expect that the zombie corpses left in the square would lead to such a war. Zombies and mutated creatures with strong auras roared in the pile of corpses and began to fight each other again. Chief, due to the special wave of energy last night, many soldiers have awakened their superpowers. The corresponding crystal nuclei have been allocated, and the soldiers have improved a lot. Our troops have been reorganized and weapons and ammunition have been fully prepared. Can we start a rescue operation? In the military area shelter, in the old chief's office, a man in his 40s, carrying 2 3-star guns on his shoulders, was sitting on the sofa. Jianfeng, what do you think our chances of winning are? The old chief held a cigarette in his hand, pondered silently for a while, and looked at the soldier with sharp eyes. Chief, I don't know the specific odds of winning, but as soldiers, we will go all out to ensure we complete the mission. Yi Jianfeng stood up quickly, put his feet together and saluted, making a loud gesture. Sit down, don't be so excited. The old leader waved his hand, and Yi Jianfeng immediately relaxed and sat down. Chief, there are more and more first-level and even second-level zombies appearing now. The effect of ordinary weapons on the second-level bronze-armored zombies has been greatly reduced. If we don't take action, I'm afraid our thermal weapons will gradually become ineffective as time goes by. By then, the price we have to pay to rescue the people will be even more tragic. Yi Jianfeng's tone was heavy and full of worry. I don't know, but the more critical the situation, the more people want to act like monsters. The old leader let out a long sigh, with anger and murderous intent in his eyes. I understand, Chief, but you have to believe that our soldiers are all people's soldiers who can stand the test. I have followed your instructions and spread the news that the troops are about to launch a rescue operation. The soldiers responded very positively. So, I think this is the general trend. Even if some people want to act like monsters, they don't dare to go out of their way at this time. Yi Jianfeng said in a low voice that he knew the old leader's worries very well, but he had to shoot when the arrow was on the string. If some people really wanted to go against the general trend, he would not mind removing this obstacle with his own hands. Well, that's good. Jianfeng, Gong Zhan is already on his way back. When the time comes, you must cooperate with him. The rescue operation must be launched within 2 days at most. The old leader nodded, put out the cigarette butt in his hand, stood up and spoke in a serious voice. Yes. Chief, we will definitely live up to our mission. Yi Jianfeng stood up, performed a military salute, and replied solemnly. Go, there is news from the palace war. It seems that the harvest is not small. You lead a team of soldiers to respond to him. The old chief saluted back and said with deep meaning, Yes. I'll go right away. Yi Jianfeng's eyes lit up, and then his face darkened. He understood instantly, and turned around to leave neatly. Alas, at this time of national crisis, old comrade, how did you become like this? The old chief walked to the window, his eyes seemed to pass through the space, looking at a tall building in the distance, and let out a deep sigh. Yi Jianfeng sat in a military vehicle with a calm expression. 3 military vehicles led a platoon of soldiers and quickly rushed to the tarmac in the distance. On the wide apron, 4 helicopters were landing slowly. Seeing that there were not many soldiers on the tarmac, Yi Jianfeng couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. He opened the door and jumped out without waiting for the military vehicle to stop. Not far away, Gong Zhan was carrying a large backpack and helping Gu Zemin get off the helicopter. Yi Jianfeng quickly led the soldiers behind him to greet him. Jianfeng, this is Professor Gu Zemin Gu. Professor Gu, this is the current commander of the garrison area of our military region, Colonel Yi Jianfeng. Gong Zhan introduced both parties with a smile on his face. The original commander of the security area had died in the zombie outbreak. Yi Jianfeng, who was originally just a deputy, was temporarily appointed as the commander. Professor Gu, welcome to your arrival. The leader has been ordering Gong Zhan to send you safely to the military area as soon as possible. It's a pity that this kid just doesn't listen. Yi Jianfeng laughed and stepped forward to hold Gu Zemin's hands. I don't blame Gong Zhan. It's because I insisted on completing the research, which delayed a lot of time. Seeing the implicated palace battle, Gu Zemin felt a little embarrassed. It's okay. As long as you arrive safely, if the old chief scolds you a few times, that's just concern. Gong Zhan quickly waved his hands with a silly smile on his face and winked at Yi Jianfeng. How could Yi Jianfeng not know the situation? He was just trying to appease Gu Zemin's emotions. It will get dark soon. It's not safe outside. Let's take Professor Gu to rest first. Yi Jianfeng glanced at the sky and said seriously immediately. Can you please let me see the chief first? I have something I need to tell the chief. Gu Zemin hesitated for a moment, then said softly. The chief hasn't rested yet, I'll take you there. Yi Jianfeng pondered for a moment, then called over the soldiers on the side and led Gu Zemin to the military vehicle. Jianfeng. Gong Zhan pulled Yi Jianfeng's arm and winked. Yi Jianfeng understood and fell a few steps behind without leaving any trace. General Gong Zhan patted his backpack, and Gao Yang and Gu Lai behind him also gave vague gestures. You 3, come with me to find the chief. Yi Jianfeng nodded, took Gong Zhan and the other 2 people and got into the same car with Gu Zemin. Yunhu Villa area, Banpo Mansion. Wang Mingyang's roar caused Su Yu and the other three to run out one after another. The two girls had long hair with wet hair and disheveled clothes. The three of them rushed to the terrace, but Wang Mingyang was nowhere to be seen. While he was secretly worried, several explosions and roars suddenly came from the villa area at the foot of the mountain, and then flames shot into the sky. Then they saw the metal gate of the villa disappear, and the three of them looked at each other, and then they came to their senses. Apparently Wang Mingyang discovered something and rushed down directly. "You guys go ahead and take a shower, I'll go take a look." Li Yuchan's frown suddenly relaxed, and he waved his hands. Su Yu was a little worried. "Let's go together too." "No! Lao Wang didn't call us just now, so there must be no danger." Li Yuchan chuckled. He had awakened his spiritual power, and his senses were relatively sharp. From the roar just now, he felt a kind of wanton joy, not anxiety or anger. "Probably, if there is really any danger, Wang Mingyang will definitely remind us." Mu Ningxue thought for a moment and nodded. "Well, Yuchan, go and have a look." Seeing both of them saying this, Su Yu also felt that with Wang Mingyang's strength, there would probably be no problem, so he stopped insisting. "Okay. Go back." Li Yuchan said no more, and jumped out of the terrace. With his mental power strong, he held his body and floated down. The moment he landed, his feet exerted force and his body ran outward quickly. "Let's go." Seeing that Li Yuchan had already gone out, Mu Ningxue pulled Su Yu and walked downstairs. When Li Yuchan ran down the mountain, he saw only a fork in the road. The ground was full of broken limbs, and the bodies were still burning with flames. Wang Mingyang was holding an iron ball high and throwing it towards the corpses rushing in front of him. The iron ball crossed a distance of more than 10 meters. The moment it came into contact with the group of zombies, sharp pieces of iron suddenly exploded from the iron ball. The iron pieces shot out, directly cutting apart the zombies at the front. Until the entire iron ball turned into iron pieces and shot, all the more than 20 zombies coming towards him were cut into pieces. A metal storm, so terrifyingly powerful. It was like a bomb suddenly exploded in a dense crowd. The only difference is that there is no smoke in the entire iron ball bomb. "Fuck! Did you eat explosives?" Li Yuchan was stunned. Wang Mingyang's move was so lethal. Why are you here, puppy baby?" After Wang Mingyang finished cleaning up the zombies, he turned to look at Li Yuchan strangely. Li Yuchan rolled his eyes. "You made such a big fuss, why did you come to me? I was still taking a bath, and you surprised me." "Haha. I'm sorry, I was promoted to the 3rd level just now and my hands are a little itchy." Wang Mingyang scratched his head with a proud look on his face. "3rd level, you are too fast. We have only advanced to the 2nd level." Li Yuchan was speechless. This guy must be cheating. "Oh, don't worry, you're almost here too." Wang Mingyang stepped forward and hugged his shoulders, teasingly. "Well, that's true. It's not far away." Li Yuchan nodded when he heard this. Thanks to the 2nd-level spiritual crystal core and Lianzi's assist, he also faintly felt the 3rd-level barrier. "You're here just in time. Let's collect these zombie crystal nuclei." Wang Mingyang chuckled, and if he asked him to collect them by himself, he might even get his hands dirty. He had just taken a shower, and he didn't want to get dirty again right away. "Depend on." Li Yuchan gestured with his middle finger and reluctantly stepped forward to activate his mental power. Gray-white crystal nuclei continued to emerge, and more than 100 ordinary zombies contributed about 20 crystal nuclei. Not too bad. Let's go. There will be mutated mosquitoes or other things coming over, and we will be tired for a long time. Li Yuchan threw the crystal core to Wang Mingyang, turned around and walked up the slope. "Well, that's fine. I released it once. I don't want to fight again." Wang Mingyang waved his hand to put away the crystal core, ran forward and put his arms around Li Yuchan's neck, and the two of them fought and fussed all the way back to the villa. In the villa area at the foot of the mountain, after Wang Mingyang and the others left, faces appeared from behind the windows of each villa. Everyone looked at the corpses at the fork in the road in shock. These more than 100 zombies had always been a nightmare for these survivors. But he didn't expect that in an instant, he would be killed by this young man who suddenly appeared, chopping melons and vegetables. "Mom, that big brother is so awesome!" A little girl of 7 or 8 years old said in a low voice, holding the corner of a beautiful woman's clothes. The beautiful woman nodded and murmured to herself, "Yes, so many zombies were killed by him alone. They seem to be living in the villa above. Can we go find him for help? I miss my dad." The little girl cried with a hint of tears and hugged the beautiful woman tightly. "Eating is good. When the disaster is over, Dad will definitely come back." The beauty felt a pain in her heart, hugged her daughter tightly with both hands, and said in a trembling voice. From the window on the 3rd floor of another villa, a middle-aged man's eyes were shining brightly, looking at the gradually extinguishing fire in the distance. "My ability can only kill one zombie at a time and can be released up to 5 times. How can they actually release it so many times in a row?" A short lightning spear appeared in the man's hand, making a crackling sound, which made the man's face look gloomy. He awakened this power last night, and after testing it, he was able to kill a zombie with one strike. I spent the morning and afternoon sneaking around to clean up the zombies around my house and the villa next door, collected some supplies, and had a nice meal. Just when he was about to show off his grand ambitions, he didn't expect such a strong man to come. There are about 100 villas in the villa area on this side, distributed around Yunhu Lake, and there are still many survivors. Many people saw the scene just now. Even those who didn't see the specific situation, standing on the top of the building, saw the fire rising into the sky and the zombies running downstairs. For a time, many survivors felt a glimmer of hope in their hearts. Even though this villa area is far away from the city, many people prepare a lot of food at home. But after 8 days, no matter how much money was saved, it was almost used up. After all, there are only a few people who store a large amount of top-quality hams and steaks in the basement like the villa in Banpo. What's more, how many of these rich people can control their mouths? Wang Mingyang and Li Yuchan quickly returned to the villa, and Wang Mingyang restored the metal door again to prevent zombies from accidentally entering the house. Su Yu and Mu Ningxue had already finished taking a shower and were sitting in the living room in clean clothes waiting. When the two people came in, they quickly stood up and looked at Wang Mingyang. "Brother Mingyang, are you okay?" Su Yu asked Xiao Qiao. Wang Mingyang waved his hand and said, "It's okay. I'm just going to go out and let it go." "What's going to happen? Release?" The two girls didn't know why and looked at each other. "This guy has advanced to the next level, my hands are itchy." Li Yuchan sat down on the sofa. All the curtains in the living room were closed, and a dim floor lamp was lit around the sofa. "Brother Mingyang, you have been promoted to the 3rd level." When Su Yu heard this, he looked surprised and his eyes lit up. Mu Ningxue also looked surprised, looking at Wang Mingyang up and down with envy on her face. "Well, the lotus seeds have exhausted their energy and absorbed the 3rd-order gold crystal core." Wang Mingyang nodded and sat down with a calm expression. But the slightly raised corners of his mouth showed the joy in his heart. In his previous life, he did not reach the 5th level until the 4th year of the end of the world, and he made no progress after that. Unexpectedly, after he was reborn, he had already become a 3rd-level superpower on the 8th day of the apocalypse. Moreover, his combat power far exceeded that of ordinary 3rd-level superpowers, and the pleasure brought by the surge in strength made him feel relaxed and happy. "Brother Mingyang, you are so awesome!" Su Yu clapped his hands and smiled, with a look of admiration. Wang Mingyang laughed and said, "Sprinkle some water." The backbone and strongest person in the team was promoted again, and for a while, the 4 of them were all smiling. After several people had laughed, Wang Mingyang pondered for a moment and suddenly asked, "The lotus seeds in your body should be almost finished digesting, right?" Mu Ningxue nodded. "Well, it feels like it's almost here." Su Yu, "Mine is almost done. I think it will be digested in another 2 hours. Li Yuchan shrugged. "Mine too. That's just right. After digesting this one, eat one immediately." This lotus seed gives me the feeling that it not only increases energy, but also improves mental strength and the entire body. Eating a few more seeds will be good for your future development. Wang Mingyang nodded. From his own personal experience, these lotus seeds have a huge effect and can improve people with superpowers in all aspects. At the same level, those who have eaten lotus seeds have higher energy reserves, mental strength, and physical fitness than those who have never eaten lotus seeds. For example, an ordinary superpower has 100 blood points, 100 mana points, and 1000 experience points required for upgrading. Eating a lotus seed can increase it to 120 blood points and 120 mana points, but the upgrade requires 2000 experience points. It doesn't seem like much improvement, but after advancing to the next level, the value doubles. And as Wang Mingyang absorbs a variety of abilities, this basic value will also increase. The foundation is extremely solid. There were 3 lotus pods and a total of 27 lotus seeds. Wang Mingyang ate 2 by himself, while Su Yu and the others had 6, leaving 19 lotus seeds left. It seems like a lot, but in fact it's not much at all. The increase in spiritual energy burst, 2 lotus seeds and a 3rd-level gold crystal core allowed him to advance to the 3rd level. If he simply ate lotus seeds, he would probably need at least 8 to 10 to be promoted to a 4th-level superpower. Calculating this way, if Su Yu and the 3 of them share it equally, each of them can eat up to 4 pills. If you want to improve quickly, you still need to hunt for high-level crystal cores as soon as possible. Having made up his mind, Wang Mingyang said, "Tomorrow morning, let's go to the city center." Why go downtown? If you want to collect supplies, there are 2 large supermarkets in Nanqing district. Su Yu and the others said in confusion. There are many zombies in the city center, and there are also many advanced zombies. If we want to improve our strength, we need to take advantage of now and hunt for some crystal cores as soon as possible. The longer time goes by, the stronger the mutated creatures will become, and our advantage will shrink by then. This is like sailing against the current. If you don't advance, you will retreat. Wang Mingyang shook his head and analyzed, and when he came back, he took a slight detour to the building materials market on the edge of the city. That's true. Liu Chan's eyes lit up, convinced. Su Yu stood up and said, I'm going to cook. Let's go to bed early after dinner. Xiao Yu, let me help you. Mu Ningxue stood up with a smile and held Su Yu. Okay, Sister Shui. Su Yu smiled, and the 2 of them quickly walked to the kitchen. The curtains in the hall and kitchen were tightly closed, and it would not be very bright for the time being. Even if there were mutant creatures, they were attracted away by the fire just under the mountain. The 4 of them had a simple dinner, and then went back to their houses to rest. Wang Mingyang turned on the bedside night light and thought about the afternoon battle. Ho Jun's A-level shadow flickers, appears and disappears, and is a magical assassin's skill. Compared with the teleportation in the space system, the distance is much worse, but it is more practical in the early stage. I'm afraid it's still a little difficult to get teleportation. I don't have enough understanding. Wang Mingyang looked at A Brief History of Time in his hand with a tangled look on his face. Even though he had 1 eye and 10 lines and quick thinking, he still felt that reading this book was very difficult. After thinking for a while, Wang Mingyang took out another book on space dimensions. Flatland is a fantasy novel with a rich imagination of spatial dimensions. Maybe it can give him a deeper understanding of space. With the blessing of 1 eye and 10 lines, Wang Mingyang quickly finished reading the book. It is detected that the host is reading Flatland for the first time. Reward reading value, 100 points. The system, why did it give the reading value but not extract the fragments? Flatland is a fantasy novel, but the content in the book can inspire the host's space, and the reading value is rewarded. This? Wang Mingyang was dumbfounded. Host's current reading value, 100 points. Please, host, study hard. The reading value is too low for a long time, and the system defaults to the host having no enterprising spirit, and the punishment mechanism will be activated. What? There is also punishment. What punishment? Elementary punishment: randomly erase one of the host's abilities. Intermediate punishment: randomly erase 3 abilities of the host. Advanced punishment: erase all abilities of the host. Ultimate punishment: erasure, host. Holy crap! You want to erase the host? Can you still play like this? Wang Mingyang was speechless. Wasn't this forcing him to study? Originally he thought it was a golden finger, but he didn't expect that this golden finger also had a chopped finger. The host has been frantically testing the edge of primary punishment for a day. Since it is the host's first offense, the punishment is temporarily exempted. Please, host, study hard. Convex plus? The system sounded a contemptuous prompt, leaving Wang Mingyang speechless for a while. Isn't it just a reading value? Let me show it to you. Wang Mingyang still doesn't believe it. He has a quick eye and quick thinking, so he is still worried that his reading value is too low? Just spend some time and read 2 books, it's worth reading. It seems like a punishment, but in fact it is a spur from the system to him. Just like the homework assigned by the teacher in class. If you don't finish it well, you will be criticized. Punishment is not an end, it is just a means. The main purpose is to allow students to study well. Putting Flatland aside, Wang Mingyang searched the books in the system library. After a while, 10 books materialized in front of me. Come on! I won't sleep tonight first. The next morning, Zhutian got up unusually early. He found tea leaves from nowhere, boiled a pot of water in the kitchen, made himself a cup of tea, and sat leisurely in the pavilion on the terrace. Su Yu and Mu Ningxue also got up one after another, washed themselves, and started making breakfast. But what confused the 3 of them was that Wang Mingyang didn't get up until after 11 o'clock. Didn't Wang Mingyang say he would go to the city center early in the morning? Why don't you get up yet? Mu Ningxue stood aside with her hands folded and said with a puzzled look on her face. Su Yu prepared lunch, shook his head, and wondered. Is it too late to read a book? It's really possible. Brother Mingyang, why do you like reading so much? There are benefits to reading books. The 2 books he lent me really opened my mind. As Mu Ningxue spoke, a snowflake appeared on her fingertips. Is this your new move? Su Yu teased. A hexagonal, fist-sized snowflake looked beautiful. Don't underestimate this snowflake of mine, it's very sharp. Mu Ningxue smiled slightly, flicked her fingertips, and the snowflakes flew out quickly, like a sharp blade, easily slicing through a small bowl on the kitchen table. The snowflakes passed through the small bowl, suddenly exploded into a ball of ice mist in midair, and slowly dissipated. The small bowl suddenly cracked in the middle and split evenly into 2 halves. This? Su Yu was stunned. She never thought that Mu Ningxue's snowflake would be so powerful. I accidentally discovered the shape of snowflakes from those 2 books, and suddenly I thought that if the snowflakes were enlarged and strengthened, wouldn't they be rotating hidden weapons? Mu Ningxue looked at her masterpiece with satisfaction and explained softly. Awesome! No, I have to ask Brother Mingyang for 2 books, otherwise my abilities will remain unchanged. Su Yu shook his head and said unwillingly. No, isn't your move more powerful? And you can now use your energy freely. Mu Ningxue smiled slightly and comforted her. But there haven't been many changes. I always feel that there should be other changes that can be made. Su Yu pouted and shook off the water stains on his hands. I can't help you with this. We have different abilities. Mu Ningxue spread her hands and chuckled. Ha! There's nothing I can do to help. Wang Mingyang yawned and walked down from the 2nd floor with a sleepy look on his face. Brother Mingyang, get up! When Su Yu heard this, he saw that Wang Mingyang had gotten up and immediately smiled. I read too late last night, and I was really sleepy in the morning. Wang Mingyang stretched out his body and rubbed his neck. You guessed it right. Su and you looked at each other and winked. Brother Mingyang, do you want to have breakfast? Or are you waiting for lunch? Su Yu asked with a smile. It would be almost noon. Let's have lunch. Where's Lebu Bao? Wang Mingyang responded and looked around to see Li Yuchan. He went to the terrace after breakfast. Okay, leave him alone. Wang Mingyang slumped down on the sofa, closing his eyes and thinking. Seeing this, Suyu turned around and continued to prepare lunch. Mu Ningxue curled her lips and gave Suyu a hand. The eldest lady who once had no fingers in the water soon learned to do it. Wang Mingyang calmed down and began to review last night's harvest. Host's current reading value, 13,590 points. Throughout the night, Wang Mingyang read the 10 books 2 or 3 times. However, his reading speed improved again. The B-level ability, Mental Rubbing, allows you to directly store images in your mind as long as your mental power sweeps over text, calligraphy, painting, or even the external environment, extremely fast. The B-level superpower, Extraordinary Thinking, greatly enhances his ability to understand knowledge, as if his brain has been expanded, and is comparable to the understanding of scientific masters such as Hualao. The C-level superpower, Hydrogen Control, can control hydrogen in the air, which is of the same level as oxygen control and complements each other. In this way, using 2 powers at the same time can produce violent explosions and high-temperature flames. At the same time, there are also space cuttings and several static fragments of time. Last night, he mainly focused on acquiring the 2 B-level passive abilities. Wang Mingyang planned to wait until he was free tonight to stop the abilities. With these 2 passive blessings, Wang Mingyang is confident to develop powerful powers such as electromagnetic force and gravity. Unfortunately, Wang Mingyang has been promoted to the 3rd level, and absorbing the C and 2B abilities has not brought much improvement to his body. The foundation is too solid and the base number is a bit large, so this improvement is not so obvious. Boss Wang, it seems that some people are coming outside. Liu Chan's voice sounded, and he floated down from the terrace, pushed open the door of the villa and said, Oh? Have you seen who they are? Wang Mingyang stood up and asked doubtfully. Liu Chan shook his head. I don't know, but he is well dressed and may be a survivor in the villa area. Su Yu and Mu Ningxue also walked out of the kitchen after hearing this. Well, let's go out and see what these people want to do. Wang Mingyang frowned slightly and walked towards the door. Several people walked out of the villa and went straight to the courtyard door. Wang Mingyang waved his hand and opened the door, and about 20 men and women appeared in front of them. Who are you? What do you want to do? Wang Mingyang looked around and said coldly. Everyone looked at each other, and finally a middle-aged man came out, adjusted the glasses on the tip of his nose, and spoke. Hello, little brother, we are the survivors of this villa area. Tell the important point. Wang Mingyang didn't bother to pay attention and said nonsense. If he wasn't a survivor in the villa area, could he be from somewhere else? Are you from outside? We want to know about the situation in the city. Has the government launched any rescue? The bespectacled man hesitated slightly, his expression not very good, but he continued. I don't know, you can go and see for yourself. Wang Mingyang finished speaking coldly, turned around and wanted to leave. Hey, why are you like this? I just asked you 2 questions. What kind of attitude is this? A young man covered in famous brands said suddenly when he saw Wang Mingyang turning around. It's just that, at first glance, they are not the owners of this mansion, and they are definitely not good people. I'm just telling you, don't ask for any news. What news can a wage earner like this have? It's a pity that there is no signal. Otherwise, I could call the city leaders directly. My uncle is from the provincial government. My uncle is still a member of the provincial party committee. Wang Mingyang's attitude aroused everyone's dissatisfaction, and everyone spoke with contempt and disdain on their faces. The middle-aged man with glasses frowned slightly. Are these people unclear about what happened last night? Seeing the cold eyes of the young man across from him, the middle-aged man with glasses quickly smoothed things over. Shut up, you all. When did this happen? Why are you still showing off? It doesn't matter if your uncle is from the provincial government or from the provincial party committee. I don't even know whether he is alive or not. The middle-aged man with glasses pointed at the 2 young men showing off their elders and scolded them angrily. Then he turned his head and looked at Wang Mingyang with a smile on his face and said, Little brother, we have no other intention. We mainly want to know what is going on with these zombies so that we can make plans. Wang Mingyang snorted coldly. It's been 7 or 8 days since the zombie outbreak. What else do you expect? Just wish yourself good luck. Has the government never taken action on such a big matter? The middle-aged man with glasses looked disappointed, but still said with a little hope. I don't know, at least I didn't see any movement before last night. Wang Mingyang shook his head. He was also curious about this. The previous government launched the rescue on the 3rd day, but it only rescued some important people. It was actually 10 days after the large-scale rescue began that the army began to advance layer by layer from the north. But in a city where millions of people gathered, there were so many zombies, and various mutant creatures. Even with the powerful firepower of the army, the entire Spring City could not be fully liberated after a month. Instead, they suffered heavy losses under the siege of various high-level zombies and mutant creatures. It also led to the emergence of some more powerful creatures, directly entrenched in the city center. When these people in front of them heard that the government had not taken any action, they couldn't help but be filled with fear and despair about the future. They were whispering and wailing. Little brother, I have an unkind request. I don't know whether to say it or not. The middle-aged man pondered for a while and then came closer with a smile on his face. Wang Mingyang smiled coldly. Since you know it's an unkind invitation, then don't say it. The middle-aged man with glasses was stunned for a moment. Shouldn't you say, please speak? Doesn't this guy understand that this is just a simple form of humility? In normal social interaction, shouldn't you give me a step to speak out? Pfft. Su Yu and Mu Ningxue behind Wang Mingyang couldn't help covering their mouths and laughing. Liu Chan also pretended to cough twice. Ahem, well, we've run out of food these days. The manager of this mansion, Mr. Lei, has been in contact with me a lot before. I remember that there were a lot of hams, steaks, etc. in the basement of his house. I wonder if my little brother can be generous and give some to all of us. The man with glasses coughed twice, fearing that Wang Mingyang would stop him, so he quickly spoke out. When everyone heard that there was food in the mansion, they immediately gathered around and started asking Wang Mingyang to share the food. The more Wang Mingyang listened, the more he frowned, and a burst of anger arose spontaneously. While a group of people were chattering, the man with glasses noticed that Wang Mingyang's face was getting darker and darker, and the other 3 people were also frowning and their eyes were getting colder. Involuntarily, he slowly retreated to one side and retreated directly into the crowd. And a few guys who didn't know whether to live or die unexpectedly surrounded him without knowing it. Shut up! Wang Mingyang finally couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. He shouted angrily and stepped out suddenly. The solid asphalt road instantly became cracked. The sudden burst of momentum frightened all the survivors into retreating and surrounded the people in front. They even took a few steps back and sat down on the ground. A bunch of bastards, who gave you the confidence to come to me for food? If you want to eat, go find it yourself. If you don't want to starve to death slowly, go kill zombies. If you dare to chirp again, you don't have to wait to starve to death. I will give him a ride directly. Wang Mingyang directly threw a fireball as big as a basin and hit the rocks not far away. The violent explosion was accompanied by flames that reached the sky, and gravel and smoke fell sparsely. This huge power immediately made several people look unhappy, and some who were ready to make a move immediately lowered their heads, fearing that their eyes would meet the young man in front of them. The corners of the glasses man's mouth couldn't stop twitching, and a chill ran down his spine. In the palm of the hand behind his back, a flash of lightning will bloom and then disappear immediately. Who else has something to say? A fireball appeared in Wang Mingyang's palm again, and his cold eyes scanned the audience. There is none left. There is none left. The few people who were paralyzed on the ground saw Wang Mingyang's gaze moving over and immediately waved their hands and said in a trembling voice. Others also looked away and did not dare to speak. Since there isn't, why don't you get out of here? Wang Mingyang shouted angrily again, making everyone present tremble again. He hurriedly stumbled and ran down the mountain. The few people who had collapsed also stood up tremblingly, and staggered down the mountain. What a bunch of bees! Wang Mingyang extinguished the fireball, spat, and cursed in a low voice. Okay, these people are used to being aloof and think this is a time of peace. Mu Ningxue smiled slightly and stepped forward to persuade. Humph, these people just won't cry until they see the coffin. Just watch. In a few days there will be more first-level zombies and mutated creatures. By then, these people will be either dead or disabled. Wang Mingyang smiled coldly, turned around and walked into the mansion. Li Yuchan shrugged at the two of them. Su Yu and Mu Ningxue smiled lightly and returned to the villa together. Boss Wang, I think there are some restless elements among these people. Li Yuchan sat down, put his hands on the sofa, and smiled as if he was watching the excitement. Have you noticed it too? Haha, there are so many people who should be awakened once. Wang Mingyang laughed and didn't take it seriously at all. People who have awakened their powers always think that they are the most special and powerful people. If you don't experience severe beatings in the last days, how can you know that there are people outside the world and there is a world outside the world? Then what should we do? You can only be a thief for 1,000 days, but there is no way to prevent a thief for 1,000 days. Li Yuchan's tone was calm, but with a hint of murderous intent. This fake Taoist priest, under Wang Mingyang's persuasive guidance, had started eating meat twice more, and he already had some determination to kill. You're right. After dinner later, Lei Bao, you can go out with me. Su Yu, you and Mu Ningxue are here to look after the house. Anyone who enters the villa, kill! Wang Mingyang nodded, thought for a moment, and said coldly. Su Yu and Mu Ningxue were startled, looked at each other, and then nodded silently. But if the two of us go out, those people will know that the two sisters stayed in the villa. Li Yuchan was a little confused. Don't worry, eat first, I will figure it out later. Wang Mingyang smiled mysteriously and looked confident. Seeing what he said, Li Yuchan and the others stopped talking. After a brief meal at noon, Wang Mingyang and Li Yuchan simply packed up and then went to the basement to drive. Sister Shui, can you tell me how Brother Yang can deceive those people? Su Yu asked after clearing the dishes and sitting next to Mu Ningxue. Mu Ningxue wiped the horizontal knife and smiled slightly. I don't know either, but since he said it, there must be a way. We just need to guard the villa. Oh, that's true. Su Yu nodded, but there was still a trace of curiosity in his eyes. An off-road vehicle rushed out of the underground parking lot and quickly drove out of the courtyard. The huge metal door opened into a portal and then closed again. Boss Wang, we are about to pass the villa area, what are you going to do? Li Yuchan sat in the passenger seat and looked at Wang Mingyang curiously. Haha, keep an eye out. Wang Mingyang smiled mysteriously, and a wave of energy spread out gently. Li Yuchan looked left and right, but there was nothing happening. Look back. Wang Mingyang curled his lips. Li Yuchan turned his head in confusion, and then slowly opened his mouth. What the hell? What is going on? In Li Yuchan's eyes, Su Yu and Mu Ningxue suddenly appeared in the back seat. He and Wang Mingyang were the only ones who got on the bus just now, so why did two beauties suddenly appear? Suddenly, Li Yuchan frowned slightly, his mental energy surged out of his mind, and he reached towards the two people in the back seat. Holy shit! Damn it! Boss Wang, how did you do that? Under Li Yuchan's mental detection, the back seat was actually empty. But his eyes clearly saw Su Yu and Mu Ningxue sitting in the back seat with expressionless faces. Making a shadow to keep one's image, it's just a small trick. Wang Mingyang smiled and looked proud. A shadow remains? You mean, it's just an image? Li Yuchan was stunned for a moment, then reacted and looked at Wang Mingyang speechlessly. It's just a phantom, it has no other functions. Wang Mingyang nodded. However, it is enough to deceive those restless people. Li Yuchan was speechless. How much ability do you have? Why are you so scary every day? Damn, this is just an E-level power, why are you surprised? Wang Mingyang showed his middle finger. Li Yuchan. This is not a matter of level, okay. However, Li Yuchan was already somewhat used to Wang Mingyang's supernatural powers appearing from time to time. Everyone has secrets, and as a brother he recognized, Liu Chan would not delve into them. Anyway, this is a good thing for myself. Hey, I knew you didn't have any good intentions. Someone is going to be in trouble. Liu Chan had already begun to imagine the desperate expressions on those people's faces when they stepped into the villa and faced two beauties with murderous intent. The two looked at each other and then laughed. In the villa area, a middle-aged man with glasses and a few survivors sat in a villa facing the street with gloomy expressions, smoking cigarettes in silence. It wasn't until the faint rustle of cars was heard on the passage leading to Banpo's mansion that everyone showed excitement. They all came to the windows, quietly pulled up a corner of the curtains, and peeked out. An off-road vehicle sped by. The middle-aged man with glasses squinted his eyes slightly, trying to see clearly the people in the off-road vehicle. Mr. Wu Xing, all those people are out! A rich second generation shouted excitedly. Keep your voice down, but there are indeed 4 people. A fat man with a big belly shouted in a low voice. Don't worry, the soundproofing effect of my villa is very good. I couldn't hear anything outside the unobstructed conference before, haha. The rich second generation chuckled, seeming to think of some beautiful scene. Another middle-aged man nodded and whispered softly. Yes, there are 2 men in front and 2 women sitting in the back. It's a pity that those 2 girls also went out. These 2 girls are really seductive. A middle-aged man in security uniform smiled lewdly. How long has it been, and you still think about women? Wu Xing, the man with glasses, snorted coldly. When he saw the off-road vehicle driving out of the villa area, he casually lowered the curtains and sat down. The villa where the 5 Wu Xings were hiding was the residence of the young rich second generation who spoke at the beginning. He found a pair of binoculars from nowhere, ran to the rooftop and looked out for a long time. Mr. Wu Xing, those guys are gone! The rich second generation returned to the villa excitedly, threw the telescope on the sofa, and sat down. Shall we start taking action? A middle-aged man dressed as a successful man said anxiously. Wu Xing pondered for a while, shook his head. Wait a moment. What are you waiting for? If you don't go find something to eat quickly, what will happen if they come back later? The middle-aged security guard asked anxiously. Idiot, just shut up if you don't understand. Wu Xing cursed slowly, and a flash of lightning flashed in his hand. The middle-aged security guard hesitated, then snorted and sat aside and stopped talking. He almost forgot that Wu Xing was also a person with superpowers. Wu Xing secretly spat, this loser, if he hadn't awakened his powers, how could he be sitting with him as a stinky security guard? Those people went out at noon yesterday and didn't come back until evening. There was a gap of 5 or 6 hours. Why are you so anxious? Besides, it was revealed just now that we knew there was food in the mansion. If it were you, wouldn't you be on guard? Maybe they are waiting for us to go out so we can catch them all. Wu Xing analyzed with a gloomy face and a low tone. President Xing, you are so smart. You are indeed the CEO of Yum. The fat man with the big belly suddenly realized it, and gave a thumbs up in praise. Hearing this, the other 3 people also praised Wu Xing for his extraordinary wisdom. Wait another hour. If these people don't show up, we'll take action immediately. Wu Xing had a smile on his face, and then he leaned on the sofa and puffed away with a confident expression on his face. The other 4 people nodded one after another, and sat down with relaxed expressions. On the elevated highway around the city, Wang Mingyang drove an off-road vehicle and rushed directly to the city. With the off-road vehicle speeding at full speed, the 2 of them quickly turned onto the turnoff into the city center. I said, Boss Wang, if we are doing this, we are clearing the way for others. Liu Chan said with a smile while knocking away the vehicles and zombies blocking the road. We have to go back the same way anyway. It's also convenient for us to clear the road. Wang Mingyang was smiling, and with Liu Chan around, he felt much more relaxed. The first time he took Suyu and Mu Ningxue out of the city, he was almost exhausted. That's true. You don't have to be so tired when you come back. Liu Chan nodded. The off-road vehicle quickly left the side road and drove another 3 kilometers. More and more zombies were attracted by the sound and gathered there. At a fairly wide intersection, Wang Mingyang suddenly drifted. The off-road vehicle almost rolled over. Li Yuchan screamed in fright, and activated his mental power and metal control at the same time. The off-road vehicle, which had tilted half of its body, turned around as expected and stopped steadily. I said, "Boss Wang, if you don't have this diamond, why don't you take this porcelain job? You almost fell over." Li Yuchan opened the car door, and with a wave of his hand, a food stall on the roadside smashed directly into the group of corpses following him. "What are you afraid of? With me here, can it turn over a metal shell?" Wang Mingyang turned off the car and jumped out of the car. The metal control was activated, and 3 or 4 nearby abandoned vehicles flew directly towards the group of corpses. Wang Mingyang activated his superpower again, and nearby metals turned into liquid and gathered together. A large metal ball formed quickly and flew towards the corpse group under Wang Mingyang's control. The metal blades shot out like a swarm of insects, and the dense and sharp blades slashed the zombie's body crazily. A mountain of corpses and a sea of blood suddenly formed. Nearly 200 zombies, including 2 or 3 first-level zombies, were cut into pieces by this metal storm. The blades all over the sky gathered into an iron ball again, and under Wang Mingyang's pull, they directly wrapped the off-road vehicle. Although there are many cars, the car you drove here cannot be driven away by others. "Bao Bao, here comes to wash the floor." After finishing everything, Wang Mingyang clapped his hands happily and waved to Li Yuchan, who was standing aside. "Fuck, you let me come every time." Li Yuchan shook his head. He had just seen Wang Mingyang's move last night, but at that time there were not many zombies and the scale of the metal storm was not large. Looking back at it now, I feel a little shuddering. The power is really terrifying. "Isn't this convenient for you? Look, I'll kill the zombies with all my strength, and you can get the crystal core just by moving your fingers." "How great!" Wang Mingyang smiled and didn't care at all. Li Yuchan was speechless. Asking him to kill so many zombies was not impossible, but it was indeed more time-consuming and laborious. After gesturing with his middle finger, Li Yuchan quickly picked out all the crystal nuclei. 200 zombies once again harvested more than 30 crystal nuclei. The smell of blood filled the air, and zombies and mutated creatures began to appear around them. Wang Mingyang and Li Yuchan quickly left and ran towards the large supermarket on the other street. The two successfully found the supermarket, but there were a lot of zombies in the supermarket. This supermarket is located on the 4th floor. The 1st to 3rd floors are shopping malls, which are densely filled with zombies. On weekends, the city center is crowded with people, and with the outbreak of zombies, not even 1 out of 10 is considered a good thing. "Boss Wang, what should we do? There are too many zombies." Li Yuchan frowned and said, "It's not that he found it difficult to kill these zombies, but he just felt that there were too many zombies. When he killed them, there would be flesh and blood stumps everywhere, and I'm afraid everything in the supermarket would be contaminated." Wang Mingyang thought for a while, then took Li Yuchan along the fire escape and climbed several floors directly. Using the surrounding metal to extend toward the window, a simple terrace was built. Wang Mingyang jumped up and stood directly on it. "What's your idea?" Li Yuchan jumped up immediately and asked curiously when he saw Wang Mingyang looking at the surrounding environment. "Look at this street, it's only 10 meters wide. If we block both ends of the street and lure the zombies down from the building." Wang Mingyang gestured to the street below with his fingers and smiled. Li Yuchan followed Wang Mingyang's movements and observed the street below, and suddenly realized something. "Do you want to serve everything in one pot?" "Absolutely. There are at least 1,000 zombies in this building, and there are quite a few near the street." Wang Mingyang nodded. "Although materials are important, crystal nuclei are equally important. We still need to collect more crystal nuclei." When Wang Mingyang saw the group of zombies in the shopping mall opposite Carrefour yesterday, he recalled the group of zombies on the campus of Yunnan University. At that time, he was only focused on fighting for the lotus seeds and did not bother to deal with them. In the palace battle, they had fierce firepower and 2 heavy machine guns. Wang Mingyang estimated that their harvest would be extremely rich after the spiritual energy broke out. I think it's feasible. It's not easy to block the road. There are so many cars, just pile them up. Liu Chan thought for a moment, and then agreed. Okay, you and I, let's block this street first. Wang Mingyang nodded and said nothing nonsense. He stepped on his foot and shot it into the air. A piece of metal suddenly flew towards his feet and fell directly to the end of the street on the right. Liu Chan was a little surprised. This guy can fly. With a faint smile, his mental power surged, and Liu Chan slid down to the left with his body. He can also fly, but it consumes too much mental energy. It is more appropriate to use telekinesis to assist with floating. Wang Mingyang stepped on this piece of metal and landed directly on the second floor of the shop on the opposite street. Wang Mingyang faced the crowded cars on the street with his hands, and his metal control ability suddenly broke out. The cars flew up out of thin air and fell towards the intersection. For a time, abandoned vehicles piled up one after another, and sharp sirens rang throughout the street. Liu Chan also stood on the eaves of the second floor of the shop, stacking cars one after another in the same manner. In order to prevent being overwhelmed by the corpses, the two people directly piled the vehicles like a pyramid 5 or 6 meters high. However, Liu Chan cleverly left a gap, and zombies from nearby streets swarmed in and rushed in directly through this gap. Wang Mingyang casually smashed several cars in the air, and the piercing sirens attracted the corpses to the center of the street. The zombies in the mall and supermarket also roared and rushed out of the mall gate in dense numbers. In just a few minutes, more than 2,000 zombies gathered on the several hundred meters long street. In the nearby building, many survivors heard the noise and poked their heads out. They couldn't help but shrink their heads when they saw the dense zombies. Then he saw two people controlling the vehicle to fly up, and he couldn't help but exclaimed, "What are these two people doing? There are so many zombies, are they seeking death? But they are so powerful, this power is too strong. Such a heavy car can fly directly. So what if it's awesome? Thousands of zombies gather together, so don't tear them apart. Are all the zombies in the shopping mall coming out? There is a supermarket there, so you can definitely find something to eat. Yes, after these two people leave, let's go over and take a look. I'm starving. No, I have to find something to eat." On the 9th day of the apocalypse, many people have awakened their superpowers, and they are no longer surprised that Wang Mingyang and the two can control cars. However, these people were at a loss as to why the two of them were making such a big fuss. But the zombies rushing out of the shopping mall made these survivors' minds come alive. Wang Mingyang and the two kept moving their positions, moving cars in the middle of the street to leave space for these corpses. In order to get rid of these zombies faster, Wang Mingyang even thoughtfully crushed the fuel tanks in some vehicles. The thick smell of gasoline filled the entire street, even covering up the stench of rotting corpses. Until the whole street was filled with zombies and the zombies outside could no longer squeeze in, Liu Chan controlled several cars and smashed them towards the gap. After spending some time blocking the gap, Wang Mingyang had already controlled the vehicle to block the mall gate. The two of them gathered in the middle of the street. Under the leadership of Wang Mingyang, the two of them flew up several floors. "Next, it's up to you." Liu Chan held his hands and stood on the metal terrace created by Wang Mingyang, which was 20 meters above the ground. "Okay, keep an eye on it." Wang Mingyang didn't talk nonsense. He narrowed his eyes slightly and activated the oxygen and hydrogen control abilities with both hands at the same time. The concentration of hydrogen and oxygen below increased rapidly. "Hey, let me tell you, don't go too far. Otherwise it will be bad if you set yourself on fire." Although Liu Chan didn't know yet that Wang Mingyang had the ability to control hydrogen, Liu Chan had seen his ability to control oxygen several times. I almost forgot, but luckily you reminded me." Wang Mingyang wiped his cold sweat. In a moment of carelessness, he actually forgot that the hydrogen concentration was too high. The power of this explosion was extraordinary. He quickly activated his power with his right hand and quickly lowered the hydrogen concentration, and then he felt relieved. Wang Mingyang's current superpower range is close to 70 meters, and the entire street is about 300 meters long. After controlling the oxygen in the center of the street, Wang Mingyang shot a bursting fireball directly. The flames soaring into the sky were accompanied by the explosion, and the corpses below were suddenly covered in fierce flames. Following the same pattern, Wang Mingyang controlled the oxygen concentration 4 times in succession, and the flames in the entire street burned violently. Coupled with the gasoline flowing on the ground to aid combustion, the corpses began to burn one after another. The entire street turned directly into a huge open-air oven. The blazing heat forced Wang Mingyang to fly to one side and landed on a building opposite the street intersection. "This movement is a bit loud." Li Yuchan looked at the soaring flames and billowing smoke, and said a little speechlessly, "This is nothing, just a little movement." Wang Mingyang chuckled and lit a flower leisurely. "What a little movement from God." Li Yuchan rolled his eyes. Why did he end up like this every time he and Wang Mingyang got into trouble together? However, I have to say that this method is indeed more convenient than killing them one by one. There were many first-level zombies in the group of corpses. Seeing that the fire was getting smaller, Wang Mingyang stepped on a piece of metal and flew over again. This scene caused nearby survivors to scream in surprise. Free flight. This has always been a dream of mankind. After killing the first-level zombies accurately, Wang Mingyang increased the intensity of the fire again. Now that it had started burning, he burned it to the bottom to avoid having to worry about it for a while. The fire burned for a full hour. When Wang Mingyang saw that there were no more moving zombies in the scene, he immediately flew over with Li Yuchan. The oxygen control ability is activated, and all the flames are extinguished and disappear. Next, it's Li Yuchan's job. "Come on, it's your turn!" Wang Mingyang gestured to Li Yuchan and smoked leisurely. Li Yuchan blocked his nostrils with 2 fingers. Although he could no longer smell the smell of rotting corpses, the smell of burnt flesh and blood was equally unpleasant. What's more, these thousands of zombies were burned at the same time. Li Yuchan felt that he was about to vomit just by breathing through his mouth. No longer bothering to tease Wang Mingyang, he quickly activated his mental power and searched for the crystal nuclei. Under Li Yuchan's quick work, hundreds of crystal nuclei fell into Wang Mingyang's mustard space. Li Yuchan, who couldn't stand the smell anymore, immediately dropped towards the mall after collecting the crystal cores. Wang Mingyang laughed loudly behind him, and the two of them quickly ran up to the 4th floor. Although flying was fun, it still consumed a lot of energy. It wasn't until he entered the supermarket that Li Yuchan relaxed his nostrils and took 2 deep breaths. But the strong rancid smell almost made him spit it out. "I said, why didn't you respond?" Li Yuchan retched uncomfortably, but saw that Wang Mingyang beside him didn't react at all. "Come on, have a cigarette, and you'll be fine once you get used to it." Wang Mingyang laughed and handed Li Yuchan a cigarette. Li Yuchan felt extremely uncomfortable, but he still took the cigarette and lit it. At least the smell of smoke can offset some of the stink. "Look around for a while and see if there are any cigars. They have a strong smell and can make you feel better." Wang Mingyang walked forward, collecting useful things he saw along the way. "I can't even smoke this cigarette, you still want me to smoke a cigar?" Li Yuchan took a long puff of the cigarette without daring to inhale it into his lungs. He spit it out directly. The rancid smell coming from the tip of his nose suddenly became lighter. "Just get used to it and take your time." Wang Mingyang waved his hand and said nonchalantly, "This supermarket is located in the city center and is larger than the previous supermarket in Nanshur district." After scraping the entire supermarket land, Wang Mingyang patted his butt and walked back with satisfaction. "Do you want to go to the basement level?" Li Yuchan had already calmed down and asked when he saw Wang Mingyang coming back. "Well, the warehouse of this big supermarket should be on the 1st and 2nd floors. Take it away when it comes." Wang Mingyang nodded, turned and walked downstairs. Immediately, Wang Mingyang scraped the entire shopping mall's materials to the ground. Whether it is clothes, shoes and hats, quilts, suitcases, furniture, kitchen appliances, etc., they are all included. The few zombies that were blocked on the 1st floor of the shopping mall were also cleaned up by the 2 of them. After a while, the supermarket warehouse located on the 2 underground floors was moved out by Wang Mingyang. But at this moment, in his mustard space, it feels like the space occupied by the stored materials is less than 1/10. After being promoted to the 3rd level, the mustard space expands again, roughly estimated to be several million cubic meters. The expansion of space allows Wang Mingyang to collect materials without any scruples. In the Yunhu Villa area, an hour after the off-road vehicle disappeared, Wu Xing and others started to make a move. After waiting patiently for another half hour, the off-road vehicle still didn't come back. The 5 of them felt relieved, carrying their homemade weapons, and quietly walked outside the house. Wu Xing originally thought that only the 5 of them had ideas, but as soon as he went out, more than a dozen people came out of other villas one after another. Wu Xing turned around coldly and looked at those people coming out from behind. "What do you want to do?" There are only about 200 villas in the entire villa area. Everyone looks down without looking up, and many people know each other. "Wu Xing, stop pretending, everyone knows it. You want to monopolize the food in that mansion, how is that possible?" "That's right, do you really think we are 3-year-old children? The gang has already gone out, and everyone will share the contents equally." More than a dozen people were divided into 4 or 5 small groups, and someone from the 3 largest groups spoke out. "Humph! If I want to share the food, I won't see if you are qualified." Wu Xing's face turned cold, and the light flashed in his hand. "TCH! It's just superpowers, who doesn't have them?" A rich second-generation man spread his hands, and 2 balls of flame came out of his palms with a look of disdain. "He's just a long-range mage. What a shame!" Another middle-aged man, covered in tendons, stamped his foot on the ground, causing several cracks under his feet. Among the dozen or so people, 3 or 4 more showed off their abilities. Wu Sheng's expression changed. He originally thought that only a few of them were special, but he didn't expect that so many people had awakened their powers. Immediately, he put away the electric light in his hand, and a smile appeared on his face. "Yes, since everyone has awakened their powers, let's go and see it together. Now that you have found the food, let's think about how to distribute it." After everyone heard this, they showed a satisfied smile. None of the people present were fools. It was indeed too early to think about how to distribute the food before they even saw it. "Okay, let's go together. Don't wait for those guys to come back. It won't end well." The rich second generation also put away the flame, nodded, and smiled. Wu Xing's eyes flickered under his glasses, and he winked at the 4 people around him without leaving any trace. A group of people ran sparsely up the mountain. After a while, they saw the mansion not far away, and they were all out of breath. "Although I have awakened my superpower, I haven't had enough to eat for many days and my physical strength is indeed not very good." The 2 young men laughed and ran over first, trying to open the door directly. It's a pity that the door has been directly welded shut by Wang Mingyang's metal control. "Let me!" The middle-aged man with tendon flesh gave a soft drink, took a deep breath and stepped forward, pressing his palms directly on the door. His muscles all over his body were knotted, and he began to exert force. Creak! The bolts connecting the door to the wall suddenly whined and began to show signs of loosening. With an angry roar, several bolts suddenly broke, and the door collapsed with a sharp sound of metal tearing. Everyone at the door suddenly cheered. Mu Ningxue, who was still reading in the room, frowned and stood up with a sigh. Su Yu put away the dark flame in his palm, reached out and grabbed the horizontal knife, snorted coldly, and walked directly out of the house. Zhuangro stood at the gate, showed off his biceps proudly, turned around and ran towards the courtyard of the mansion. A group of people behind him immediately started running. Wu Xing frowned, but still controlled his pace and walked in slowly. "Mr. Wu Xing, they have all gone in, let's hurry up." When the security guard in uniform saw Wu Xing moving forward slowly, his thoughts changed quickly, and his figure that was already running suddenly slowed down. "Why are you so anxious? What if you get the lead? It's not about whose fist is bigger." Wu Xing snorted coldly, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Mr. Wu is right. Upon hearing this, the four people immediately looked at each other and nodded in unison. There were only 5 or 6 awakened people in that group of people, and all 5 of them had their powers awakened. But before they stepped into the courtyard, a loud bang suddenly sounded. Anyone who dares to step in, kill! A female voice sounded like an aureole emerging from the valley, but the murderous intent in her tone made everyone's hearts tremble. After all, tendon meat has a strengthened body. When the dark flame sword light came from a distance, he still had time to dodge. But those ordinary people did not escape. Their whole bodies were burning with dark red flames, and they were rolling and wailing on the ground. Suyu was wearing a light black sportswear, holding a horizontal knife wrapped with dark red flames in his hand, and walked into the courtyard with a cold face. Behind her, Mu Ningxue, who also had a cold face, walked slowly, with crystal-clear snowflakes floating around her. What's going on? Aren't they all out? Yes, I saw these 2 women sitting in the back seat with my own eyes. What should we do? We don't have special powers, so run away. A few ordinary people who had not awakened their powers were running very fast just now, but now they all hid behind them in fear. What are you afraid of? They're just 2 little girls. The number of superpowers we have here is several times that of theirs. That's right, if we capture them in a while, we can have a good time. A hip-hop guy who had awakened his superpower had a look of disdain on his face. Seeing Su and Yu getting closer, he suddenly fired an ice pick from his hand and killed them directly. Huh! Play on the ice with me? Mu Ningxue had a look of disdain on her face, and a snowflake suddenly flew out from the surrounding area, directly shattering the ice cone on the opposite side and killing the 2 of them with unabated force. Don't hesitate, let's do it together! Next to the hip-hop boy, a middle-aged man who had awakened his speed-type power dodges and slashes directly at the snowflakes with a tachi he got from nowhere. Obstructed by the middle-aged man's obstruction, the 2 snowflakes changed their direction slightly and directly crossed the young man's ears. Wu Xing, who was still at the gate, had his eyes flashing. When he saw the people in front of him starting to take action, he did not hesitate and whispered to the other 4 people. The big security guard roared angrily. His muscles flexed and his whole body swelled up. He ran to the roadside with long strides, picked up a rockery boulder, and threw it towards Su and Yu. The 2 sides began to take action, and a group of superpowers began to display their abilities. For a moment, fire knives and ice picks were fired, and boulders and machetes were flying. When Suyu saw the boulder coming, he snorted coldly. The dark flames of the horizontal sword in his hand surged, and he directly split the boulder with 1 step and 1 strike. The power of the dark red sword light did not diminish, and it shot towards the door. This sword was no better than the one she had just held back slightly. The dark red sword suddenly exploded, covering a 10-meter radius with dark flames. For a while, several ordinary people at the door howled miserably. Even an awakened person who had awakened the fire power was cut in half by this knife. Mu Ningxue's body was covered with frost, and smaller snowflakes appeared out of thin air. Before the 2 speed users could get close, they were slowed down by the frost, and the tiny snowflakes cut their bodies one after another. Suddenly the 2 of them screamed in pain and quickly activated their powers to retreat quickly. But then, 2 bigger snowflakes instantly scratched their throats, their bodies stopped suddenly, and a trace of blood slowly appeared. The 2 of them are already 2nd-level superpowers, but this group of people are probably not even 1st level. Dealing with these low-level superpowers, Suyu and Mu Ningxue both felt like they were mowing grass. Looking at the dozen or so survivors left in front of them, Suyu and Mu Ningxue looked at each other, and saw a fierce killing intent in each other's eyes. Since Wang Mingyang has said it, anyone who steps into the villa, then kill! Suyu stepped forward and rushed forward. Mu Ningxue casually put an ice shield on her, stretched out her slender hand, and shook hands with the people at the door. Wu Xing's eyelids jumped wildly at the door. There were more than a dozen people in front of him, and there were 5 or 6 awakened ones. Actually, these two delicate girls killed more than 10 of them in a row like they were chopping melons and vegetables. The fat man next to him with a big belly just threw his clothes aside and transformed into a porcupine full of tusks. Seeing this, his limbs went limp and he sat down at the gate. The rich second-generation young man's palm was like a pistol, and a little red light just appeared on the tip of his finger. It seemed to be some kind of fire-based skill. Before he could use it, his whole body trembled, and the red light dissipated. "Don't hesitate! Come on!" Wu Xing yelled angrily. The arrow was on the string, and he had to fire it. The light flashed in his hand, and a short lightning spear appeared. He grabbed it and threw it directly at the oncoming Suyu. Upon seeing this, the big security guard gritted his teeth, grabbed the porcupine transformed by the fat man with both hands, and with great strength, threw the porcupine directly over. The young man's face trembled, his eyes flashed fiercely, his fingertips glowed red again, and the next moment, a flame ray shot towards Suyu. Without even thinking about it, Suyu slashed with his sword while running at high speed, and a beam of sword light slashed in front of him again. Mu Ningxue, who was behind her, had a pretty cold face. She suddenly grasped her open palm, and a huge ice flower instantly appeared in the crowd at the door. The next second, the ice flower exploded directly, and ice picks and debris were shot out one after another. The dark red sword light in the eyes of the porcupine in midair expanded rapidly. Before he had time to think about it, his whole body shrank suddenly, and the steel hairs curled up directly, wrapping his entire body. The sword light struck the porcupine, and the steel hairs flew suddenly. The porcupine let out a miserable howl and fell heavily to the ground. A deep knife mark appeared on its back, and dark flames burned. The flame ray and the lightning spear were approaching rapidly. Suyu twisted his delicate body and let the flame ray pass. The ray penetrated directly into the ground and actually caused a slight explosion. The short lightning spear seemed to have some kind of guidance ability. When Suyu twisted it, the short spear temporarily adjusted its position, and then shot directly in front of her. Suyu's pupils shrank, and he didn't have time to think too much. The sword in his hand was filled with dark flames and struck the lightning spear hard. For a moment, lightning and dark flames flew, and there was an explosion, and Suyu's figure flew back with a few strands of lightning. "Little fish!" Mu Ningxue's heart tightened and she shouted urgently. "Sister Shui, I'm fine!" Suyu stood firm, his right hand holding the sword trembling slightly. The lightning short spear was not necessarily very powerful, but it was better than surprise. If Mu Ningxue hadn't put the ice shield on her in advance, which offset most of the power, she might have been injured. A flash of disappointment flashed in Wu Sheng's eyes. Although his lightning spear was not as fast as Xiaoyan's flame ray, it could be controlled by him to a certain extent after being launched. That moment just now, if Suyu hadn't reacted quickly, he might have been tricked by him. At this moment, it was not the time to think too much. Wu Xing gave a low shout, and all the superpowers present activated their power at the same time. Mu Ningxue didn't expect that among this group of people, there would be someone with such insidious powers, and she felt frightened in her heart. A cold murderous intention suddenly surged in her heart. With a thought, several huge ice picks quickly appeared in the air. As her palm suddenly swung down, the ice picks shot at several people in the distance mercilessly. Suyu's heart was also beating wildly. He originally thought that this group of people was no threat, but he didn't expect that the boat almost capsized in the gutter. In shame and anger, she firmly grasped the horizontal knife in her hand, and a blazing dark flame suddenly erupted, covering her whole body. The horizontal sword swung rapidly, and 7 or 8 sword lights bloomed in succession, slashing at Suyu fiercely with the anger in his heart. Wu Xing did not expect that the counterattack would be so violent. As soon as the short lightning spear in his hand was thrown out, it was cut through by a blade of light, grazing his body. Several miserable howls were heard in succession, and 4 or 5 more of the few superpowers left in the field died in an instant. The thick ice pick directly pinned the 3 superpowers to the ground. The security guard and the young man who could shoot flame rays were cut in half by the sword. Under the blazing flames, their bodies didn't even shed much blood, and they fell directly to both sides. Wu Xing's heart was beating wildly, and he was filled with overwhelming fear. He screamed and turned around to run away. Humph! I want to run away, but it's too late! Suyu hated the person who almost capsized her boat the most, so she rushed towards the gate regardless of the two trembling supernatural beings in the field. Mu Ningxue frowned, and released an ice shield at Suyu from the extreme distance. She casually cut off the heads of the two superpowers with two snowflakes, and chased after Suyu in a flash. How dare you run! Come and die! Gritting his teeth, Suyu rushed out the door and saw the man with glasses running more than 10 meters away. He shouted angrily and slashed out with a knife. Wu Xing turned around when he heard the sound, and saw a dark red sword light rapidly enlarging. In desperation, his body's potential exploded, and he pounced towards the ditch on one side. The sword flashed, and an explosion roared. Suyu was slightly surprised that the sword actually missed. Then one more blow. Using his feet, Suyu quickly closed the distance. At this time, Wu Xing in the ditch was still struggling to get up. Suddenly, he realized that the light in front of him dimmed. He looked up and saw only a beautiful figure standing above the ditch with his back to the sun. No, no, no! Spare me once and I can give you a lot of money! When Wu Xing saw the horizontal knife in the figure's hand raised, he was horrified and begged for mercy again and again. Unfortunately, the next moment, as the sword was swung down, the dark red sword light suddenly flooded his field of vision. A male corpse was split in half from head to toe, and lay quietly in the ditch. Xiao Yu, are you okay? Mu Ningxue quickly approached and patted Suyu, who was standing still. Sister Shui, I'm fine. Is everything done inside? Suyu turned around and showed a smile. Well, it's done. Mu Ningxue nodded. Then go back, we have to get those corpses out, otherwise they will be so dirty. Suyu held Mu Ningxue's arm, looked around warily, and then smiled. Yeah, let's move together. A dark red flame was thrown into the ditch, and Wu Xing's body burned quickly and turned into a pile of ashes. The two women gradually drifted away until they disappeared at the gate. Sure. I'm just saying, how could that group of people leave so much food at home and just go out in such a big way? It turns out I had a backup plan. But I obviously saw these two beauties going out, right? Almost, fortunately I didn't follow him, otherwise I would have died. These two beauties are really cruel. In the woods on the roadside, among the twisted shadows, a thin young man in black emerged. The young man hid in the shadows, with fear in his eyes, and cautiously looked towards the courtyard of the mansion not far away. I saw corpses dragged out by the two girls and thrown directly into the ditch on the roadside. After all the corpses were cleared out, Suyu threw down a ball of dark flames, and the two of them covered their noses and stayed away. When the flames burned out, Mu Ningxue threw out another piece of ice. With a squeeze of her delicate hand, the ice shards exploded. There are no real remains. The two women then returned to the villa hand in hand. As for the collapsed door, they could only wait for Wang Mingyang to come back and deal with it. The young man in black held his breath and waited until the two of them were far away before breathing heavily. It's really unimaginable, these two delicate beauties. He was actually able to kill more than 20 people without changing his expression, and even smashed their bones and scattered their ashes. The young man in black shuddered, his body merged into the shadows again, and he quickly left. After Wang Mingyang and Li Yuchan collected the supplies in the supermarket warehouse, they turned around and walked out from the back of the mall. The two of them immediately rushed to another large supermarket. They still had plenty of time, and they didn't want to just go back. After all, going out is quite tiring. There were some small supermarkets and convenience stores along the way, and Wang Mingyang didn't mind it, so he collected all the things that could still be used. After the two left, the survivors hiding in every corner of the building near the mall were whispering. Wang Mingyang used flames to burn a large number of zombies. This move seemed to open a new world to these survivors. It turns out that there is a way to kill so many zombies at once without killing them one by one. Liu Chan collected so many crystal-clear crystal nuclei from the pile of corpses. This scene shocked the survivors even more. Wang Mingyang and the two worked hard to kill so many zombies, and finally produced so many crystal cores, which made many people who had never seen crystal cores think of various online novels. With the modern information explosion, if you have never eaten pork, and now you see a pig running away, how can you still not know what is going on? Some lucky awakened people began to feel anxious in their hearts. Wang Mingyang and Liu Chan ran across several streets quickly, followed by a large group of zombies, but they didn't care at all. These zombies now look like crystal nuclei to them. However, there are still some evolved zombies such as hunters and bronze-armored zombies mixed in. They haven't reached their destination yet, and the two of them don't want to clean them up yet. At their current speed, they ran for more than 10 minutes before reaching a street near another large supermarket. The two of them turned towards the path and climbed directly onto a building, throwing away all the zombies behind them. What the hell? Liu Chan stood on the edge of the rooftop and looked at the intersection below, with a look of horror on his face. This supermarket is located at a crossroads. People usually come and go, but now there are few zombies. At the intersection, a giant ball of meat nearly 10 stories high was squirming disgustingly, with various mucus dripping from the surface. This is an incubation nest? Wang Mingyang was stunned. He seemed to have heard of this situation before. Not only this meatball, where have all the nearby zombies gone? A huge mystery arose in Liu Chan's mind. There was a hospital near where the supermarket was located. It stands to reason that when zombies break out, there must be a sea of people here, but now, apart from this huge bowl of flesh, there are not many zombies nearby. Wang Mingyang also thought of this and quickly ran to the other side of the rooftop to look down. I saw hundreds of zombies gathering below, and there were still zombies crowding in the paths, roaring desperately toward the upper floors. The trail was a dead end, and a high wall blocked the way to the crossroads. Boss Wang, there's something fishy about this. Liu Chan frowned and looked down, feeling a little uneasy. There must be something fishy. Maybe we have met a big guy. Wang Mingyang's tone was low. Although he had never seen such a super meatball-like hatching nest, he had heard about it. However, compared to those descriptions, this hatching nest seems a bit small. Turning back to the other side, the meatball below was still squirming. Wang Mingyang thought, and a black line appeared and shot towards the meatball. The space cut silently submerged into the flesh ball, and pools of green mucus poured out from the torn cracks, and there were even several unrecognizable corpses. Most of the flesh and blood on the corpse had been corroded, and green mucus flowed to the ground, making a sizzling sound like strong acid. This lump of flesh is probably pregnant with something. Wang Mingyang looked serious. This situation was very similar to some rumors he heard in his previous life. Pregnant? You mean, there's something inside? Liu Chan was startled and lowered his voice. It's very possible that there must be a lot of corpse flesh and blood inside. This is very similar to the way spiders eat, isn't it? Wang Mingyang pointed at the green mucus and the bodies that slipped out. Turn flesh and blood into liquid and absorb it directly? It should be about the same. Go get some zombies and throw them down to sea. When Liu Chan heard this, he immediately ran to the other side and grabbed a few zombies directly from downstairs. The mental power controlled several zombies to float above the meatball. As soon as the power was withdrawn, several zombies immediately danced and fell down. The meatball seemed to sense the approach of flesh and blood, and several flesh and blood tentacles suddenly emerged from under the skin, tying up the zombies that landed less than 10 meters above the meatball like lightning. The tips of the tentacles plunged into the zombies' eye sockets, and several large bumps bulged out from the tentacles. They quickly moved towards the mass of flesh, and the heads of the zombies shriveled up visibly to the naked eye. The next moment, the tentacles retracted, and several zombies were dragged directly into the meatball, and the cracks on the surface were quickly closed. Hiss, this is too cruel. Liu Chan rubbed the goosebumps on his arms and shuddered a little. It seems that it is indeed not simple. Maybe it is some kind of corpse king. Wang Mingyang nodded, frowning, and the operation of the meatball indeed verified the rumors from his previous life. Some zombie alien species will evolve by devouring flesh and blood. The flesh and blood here refers to all, including the zombies themselves. Once this kind of alien species is conceived, it will basically be a terrifying creature of level 5 or above. With his current strength, he has to run away quickly if he encounters him. However, the good thing is that this zombie takes a long time to hatch. The more flesh and blood, the longer it takes to hatch, but the alien species that is successfully hatched will be more terrifying in strength. In the previous life, it was said that in a county town in the Central Plains region, the entire town was covered by terrifying flesh balls. It took 2 years of incubation, and finally a 9th-level corpse king was born. Some people discovered during the process that they could not clear it out by all means. The military even arranged missile bombings, but to no avail. The hatching nest in front of me has obviously just been born. Wang Mingyang's eyes flickered. The location of this intersection can also be regarded as the city center. This hatching nest is now as high as 10 stories and must have swallowed the flesh and blood of more than 10,000 zombies. If no special circumstances occur later, there is a high probability that 5 or 6 levels of alien species will be hatched. Back on the other side, Wang Mingyang manipulated the nearby metal to directly form a sledgehammer, and landed on a piece of iron. The hammer swung, directly knocking down the wall blocking the zombies, and the zombies immediately squeezed out of the gap. Flying forward on the iron pieces, Wang Mingyang led the group of zombies behind him, and went directly around the intersection. He has not forgotten that the flesh and blood tentacles of this hatching nest can directly extend 10 meters away. Climb up quickly and fly directly over the hatching nest back to the rooftop. Thousands of zombies rushed over and crashed directly into the hatching nest without any avoidance. As if sensing the arrival of a large amount of food, the skin and flesh on the surface of the hatching nest quickly trembled and split, and dense tentacles wrapped around the corpses. "Boss Wang, what are you doing?" When Wang Mingyang landed and released the corpses, Liu Chan was a little confused. This meatball was so terrifying, and he actually took the initiative to feed it. "It's nothing. I'm also curious about what it is gestating. Give it some food and see." Wang Mingyang shrugged and smiled. "Hatching nest, you are quite nice. Fuxing Infinite Heavenly Lord, just don't play with fire," Liu Chan chanted and rolled his eyes. "Let's go, these zombies are attracting the attention of the hatching nest. Let's take a detour into the supermarket." Wang Mingyang waved and walked towards the rooftop of the building on the other side. "Hatching nest? It's quite appropriate," Liu Chan murmured, and when he saw Wang Mingyang had walked away, he quickly followed him. On the other side of the building where the large supermarket is located, the first and second floors have been occupied by the flesh and blood of this hatching nest. The two jumped directly from the window on the 3rd floor, carefully avoiding the incubation nest body squeezing in from the opposite side, and leaned against the wall towards the supermarket. The whole building was filled with the stench of decay, but there was not a single zombie along the way. The ground was covered with dried blood, not even a corpse. Walking into the entrance of the supermarket, it was a mess, and there were some zombies or rotting corpses pressed by the shelves. Wang Mingyang shook his head and began to collect supplies. Liu Chan followed him. Although he had seen it many times, the scene of those supplies disappearing out of thin air still made him envious. As the two continued to move forward, they encountered collapsed shelves from time to time, as well as several zombie corpses whose heads were penetrated by unknown weapons. All the zombie heads were broken open, and the crystal cores inside were gone. Wang Mingyang frowned slightly. Looking at the traces, he should have gone to the upper food area. Someone got there first. The supermarket has 2 floors. After finishing the 3rd floor, the two of them walked up a long escalator. Liu Chan raised the invisible mind shield to protect the two of them. Wang Mingyang took out the horizontal knife from the mustard space and quickly formed a titanium alloy shield using some kitchen utensils he had just collected. Before reaching the 4th floor, a burst of whispers and the sound of tearing packaging plastic came from the stairs. After walking out of the escalator, Wang Mingyang followed the sound, but felt slightly happy in his heart. In the food area on the fourth floor, a thin young man, about 16 or 17 years old, was sitting on the ground, holding a large handful of potato chips and stuffing them into his mouth. Beside him, a young man wearing a peaked cap seemed to hear the footsteps of the two of them and stood up with a swish. He quickly drew the recurved bow in his hand and the arrow was already strung. When he saw clearly that they were two living people, the young man was stunned, and the tight bowstring in his hand could not help but relax. "Zhu Bai, eat quickly." The young man sitting on the ground seemed to have not yet reacted. He narrowed his eyes and spoke vaguely, with a look of happiness on his face. "Fat man! Someone is coming!" Zhu Bai kicked him speechlessly, but still looked at Wang Mingyang and Wang Mingyang with vigilance in his eyes. Wang Mingyang and Liu Chan looked at each other and smiled helplessly. "Are you survivors from the neighborhood?" Wang Mingyang slowly moved forward and asked calmly. "Don't come close to us. There are a lot of things here and we can't take them all. It's best for everyone to keep their distance." Zhu Bai frowned slightly when he saw Wang Mingyang approaching slowly with a knife, and once again drew the recurved bow to half full. The young man known as Fatty also climbed up, holding a homemade long knife in his hand, and stood directly in front of Zhu Bai, looking at them with a vigilant expression. "You can take as much as you need. I will take everything else." Wang Mingyang didn't care, and walked slowly along the passage. He said with a playful smile, "With the mustard seed space, this little thing is nothing at all. How can I not finish it?" "Are you kidding me? How can you two carry so many things?" the fat boy said with a look of disbelief. "That's my business. Get it quickly, otherwise zombies will come later, and it will be bad." Wang Mingyang smiled faintly, casually inserted the horizontal knife aside, took a bottle of happy water from the shelf, and threw another bottle to Liu Chan. "We have killed all the zombies in the supermarket. How can there be any zombies coming?" The fat man refused to accept it, and said with a frown, "Zhu Bai just told him that he planned to stay here for one night. Except for the weird big meatball outside, there are very few zombies around here." "Oh, you two cleaned it up, not bad." Liu Chan looked at these two young men who were obviously 2 years younger than him, and couldn't help but feel a little admiration. "Of course." The young man known as Fatty looked proud. Liu Chan looked him up and down and asked doubtfully, "You look thinner than me, why did he call you fat?" "Well, that's because—" The fat man wanted to say something else, but was interrupted by Zhu Bai on the side. "Shut up! Fatty, you don't know who is across from you, why are you talking about this?" Zhu Bai frowned. This fat man had no intention of guarding against others. "Actually, you should have been very fat before, but your fat has been turned into defense and strength. I said that, right?" Wang Mingyang took a sip of happy water, said lightly with a smile on his lips. How do you know?" The fat man looked surprised, and even Zhu Bai's pupils were dilated with a look of disbelief. The fat man was originally very fat, but he awakened some special ability a few days ago. All the fat on his body seemed to be absorbed and transformed, and his strength became huge. Even the sharp knives at home could not pierce the skin's defense. But his food intake increased several times, and the little food he had at home had long been exhausted. The two of them had to bravely go out to look for food. Unexpectedly, as soon as they met, the young man in front of them said so. "So, Zhu Bai, what about you? What ability have you awakened?" Wang Mingyang didn't explain, and looked directly at Zhu Bai, who was bending his bow and setting an arrow. "Who am I to tell you?" Zhu Bai snorted coldly, drew the recurved bow in his hand to full capacity, and looked coldly in his eyes. "Little guy, don't get excited." Without blinking an eyelid, Wang Mingyang's arrowhead made of fine steel instantly melted into a puddle of liquid and condensed into an iron ball again, wrapping the tip of the arrow. This? Zhu Bai's pupils tightened. This man's ability actually destroyed his arrows. How could he fight? "We don't mean any harm, but I do have a way to take away all the supplies here." "You can take as much as you can." Wang Mingyang laughed, but looked at the fat man playfully. "Humph. So what if you can damage Zhu Bai's arrow?" "I'm still not convinced." The fat man snorted coldly. Seeing Wang Mingyang's horizontal knife stuck to the side, he looked at the long knife in his hand, thrust it directly into the shelf, and clenched his fists. "Oh, you want to fight with me?" Wang Mingyang found it quite interesting. These two people have quite a temper. "Let's compare. Whoever loses will leave." The fat man said in a sullen voice that he had a huge appetite. Even if the two of them worked hard to get it, it would not be enough for him to eat for a day. After finally finding this big supermarket, why would you want to leave so easily? "That's it, that's fine, come on." Wang Mingyang put the happy water away and stepped forward with empty hands. "Be careful." The fat man shouted low, jumped a few meters away, and punched Wang Mingyang on the shoulder. He was still careful. At first glance, the young man's ability was that of metal manipulation or telekinesis. His special ability is to strengthen his body, making him very strong in both strength and defense. This wave, I have the advantage. Wang Mingyang stood still, with a smile on his face. The fat man punched him, but he just raised his palm slightly. The fat man's fist was held in his palm, and his whole body remained motionless. Zhu Bai's pupils shrank. He knew the power of Fatty all too well. This punch was definitely with all his strength. Even the reinforced concrete wall would be smashed through by this punch. But this man actually took it so easily. Zhu Bai moved his steps slightly without leaving a trace, and vaguely took out a new arrow in his right hand. "Young man, this is not okay, watch carefully." Liu Chan shook his head slightly, and activated his mental power instantly. All the arrows in the quiver on Zhu Bai's waist flew up and pierced directly on the ceiling. On the other side, the fat man was pumping his fists in disbelief, but in vain. No matter how hard he tried, his fist was squeezed tightly by Wang Mingyang. Wang Mingyang suddenly raised his right foot and kicked the fat man directly in the stomach. The huge force kicked him away instantly. The fat man flew out upside down and pulled out his fist, but his body directly hit 2 or 3 shelves. A series of coughs sounded, and the fat man slowly got up after a while, with a look of frustration on his face. Wang Mingyang looked at these two young men, with a hint of joy in his eyes. He had seen the combination of these two people with his own eyes in his previous life. Fatty, who is very fat himself, has awakened the B-level enhancement power energy conversion. The name is very simple, but this power is very powerful. He can perfectly absorb and transform his own fat, thereby enhancing his own strength and defense. Theoretically, as long as he eats enough, his defense and strength can be stacked almost infinitely. But in the end of the world, where would there be so much food for him to eat alone? And the improvement in level also limits the upper limit of his own abilities. Zhu Bai's bow and arrow never miss a beat. His specific ability is unknown. Ordinary bows and arrows can exert unparalleled power in his hands. What he awakened should be some kind of attack-enhancing superpower. What's rare is that these two people have a good reputation in the apocalypse. In the battle where Wang Mingyang met them, Fatty took the initiative to save many people by relying on his strong defense. This is also the reason why Wang Mingyang was slightly happy when he saw them for the first time. "Little fat man, it seems you are no match for me." Wang Mingyang smiled and raised his eyebrows at the fat man who had just stood up and was still rubbing his belly. "I was just careless. Let's do it again." The fat man growled lowly and was about to step forward to continue. "Fat man, stop, you are no match." Zhu Bai took a step forward, held his shoulders firmly, and said in a low tone, "Zhu Bai." The fat man looked at him aggrievedly. He was about to leave if he lost. With so much food, he hadn't eaten enough for several days. "It's okay. If there's not enough food, we'll look for it again." Zhu Bai squeezed his shoulder, shook his head and said, "All right." The fat man obviously listened to Zhu Bai's words and looked at the food with some reluctance. "Fat man, if I guess correctly, the food you eat in one day is enough for 10 people, right?" Wang Mingyang walked forward and said with a smile, "You need to take care of it. Zhu Bai and I will find more food." The fat man looked constipated. This guy actually dared to laugh at him after winning the bet. "Actually, there's no need for you to be depressed. Wang Mingyang didn't take it seriously and continued. I have a lot of food and can fully support you too. Zhu Bai narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at Wang Mingyang and Wang Mingyang. These two people are clean and have rosy faces, and they don't have the sallow complexion of others at all. From the moment they walked in until now, the two of them just drank a bottle of happy water and didn't even look at the food. You can tell just by looking at Fatty. If he hadn't suppressed Fatty and cleaned up the zombies first, I'm afraid he would have been fighting zombies while eating. You want to have us follow you? Zhu Bai's tone was calm, and a hint of vigilance flashed in his eyes. That's right, you two have pretty good abilities, I quite like them. Wang Mingyang nodded without concealing his purpose. We just met for the first time, and you let us join. Do you trust us so much? Zhu Bai was very sober. These two people were very strong and there was no need to add any burden. Fatty's appetite was not that big. Haha, trust can be built up slowly. As long as you don't have any intention of betrayal, what does it matter when you first meet? Besides, I'm afraid you can't afford the price of betrayal. Wang Mingyang said, his eyes slightly cold, and a space cut suddenly appeared, passing through Zhu Bai's side in an instant and disappearing dozens of meters away. Zhu Bai's whole body was cold, his eyes trembled slightly, and he lowered his eyes. He saw a deep crack in the floor covered with tiles. Zhu Bai slowly turned his head, and the crack spread directly for more than 50 meters. The shelves he passed along the way collapsed one after another, and the cuts were as smooth as a mirror. If that black line cuts directly through his body. After swallowing, Zhu Bai realized that this guy had been playing tricks on them all along. Following you, can I have enough to eat? Fatty saw Zhu Bai was stunned and didn't speak, so he tilted his head and said, Okay, I guarantee you'll be full every meal. Wang Mingyang nodded with a smile. Zhu Bai, he said he could eat enough, do you think, should we follow him? Fatty's eyes suddenly brightened after receiving the assurance. He hadn't felt so hungry before awakening his power. After awakening his superpower, he felt like he was suffering from hunger all the time. This kind of pain was really unbearable for him. Zhu Bai gave the fat man a complicated look, sighed in his heart, then his face became serious. He looked at Wang Mingyang and said, We can follow you, but if I feel that you treat us as cannon fodder, I will directly choose to withdraw. Wang Mingyang's eyes lit up and he smiled. Don't worry, cannon fodder is not qualified to be in my team. However, I also said it first. After following me, you can question my orders, but you must obey them absolutely. If you can't do this, you should be smart enough to understand that the team is a joke. Although Wang Mingyang is happy to have gained two relatively reliable people in his previous life, he must also ensure his absolute authority. A team that cannot do what is ordered and prohibited is simply a bunch of rabble. Okay. As long as you don't let us die, there's no harm in listening to you. Zhu Bai and Fatty looked at each other and nodded fiercely. Haha, good, good, I'm not the little brother after all. When Liu Chan saw that the two parties had reached an agreement, he immediately laughed, rubbed his hands and said, He was the youngest in the previous 4-person team. Unexpectedly, when he went out with Wang Mingyang today, he actually recruited 2 team members who were younger than him. I am Zhu Bai, and the fat man's original name is Tang Bao. I don't know your names yet? Zhu Bai's expression slowed down, and he introduced himself. Fu Xing Boundless Heavenly Lord. This is our boss Wang Mingyang. My name is Liu Chan. You can call me Brotherly, or Dao Changli. Liu Chan looked solemn, holding the Ziwu Ju in his hand. After the introduction, he winked at the two of them. Zhu Bai and Tang Bao were obviously stunned. This young man with a ponytail was actually a Taoist priest. Hello, Boss Wang. Hello, Brotherly. The two looked at each other and shouted in unison. Haha, just get acquainted. Fatty, you have something to eat first. After I collect these, we will leave. Wang Mingyang waved his hand and accepted the 2 generals, feeling extremely happy in his heart. After saying that, he ignored the 3 of them and walked directly towards the depths of the supermarket. Brotherly, how can Boss Wang collect it all by himself? There are so many things. When the fat man Tang Bao saw Wang Mingyang leaving, he immediately grabbed a bag of potato chips and started chewing them. He approached Liu Chan and asked doubtfully, "You will know the magic of Boss Wang soon." Liu Chan smiled mysteriously, casually took down the arrow from the ceiling, and flew it back to Zhu Bai's quiver. The two of them turned around and looked in confusion, only to see that all the supplies around Wang Mingyang that were not contaminated by zombie blood disappeared one after another. The whole supermarket quickly became empty. Zhu Bai and Tang Bao couldn't help but open their mouths when they saw this magical scene. "This? I really don't have to worry about eating it," Fatty Tang Bao murmured to himself, not even noticing the potato chip dregs falling out of his mouth. Revealing the mustard space, Wang Mingyang quickly left with the three of them. Due to the insufficient physical strength of Zhu Bai and Tang Bao, Wang Mingyang slowed down. Even so, Zhu and Bai were also a little stunned. The two people were running extremely fast. The zombies they encountered along the way were quickly cleared away by them. The strong strength displayed made Zhu and Bai feel even more that following them was indeed a wise choice. Returning the same way, there were not many zombies. When the two came over before, they had already attracted most of the zombies. Under the protection of Wang Mingyang and Liu Chan, Zhu Bai and Tang Bao felt for the first time that these zombies were not so scary. 10 minutes later, the four finally returned to the location of the off-road vehicle. However, that wide street was filled with corpses and flesh that had fermented over time and attracted many mutated creatures. Wang Mingyang was rude and controlled the nearby metal to kill again. Liu Chan was happy to be at ease, standing behind Zhu Bai and Tang Bao, opening his mind shield to protect them. Seeing a second-level ordinary mutated golden retriever dog following behind him, Wang Mingyang shouted, "Zhu Bai, you can try that mutated golden retriever." Liu Chan was slightly stunned, not quite understanding why Wang Mingyang asked Zhu Bai to try to kill him. Zhu Bai's eyes lit up, he bent his bow and shot the arrow. With a shrill sound, the arrow quickly flashed across a distance of 30 meters and directly hit the mutated golden retriever who had been chasing Wang Mingyang's figure. With a shrill bark, the golden retriever's waist and abdomen began to bleed. He staggered and was knocked directly against the car. Zhu Bai frowned. Looking at the length of the arrow, he saw that the arrow did not penetrate the body of the golden retriever. "Pity!" Liu Chan's eyes lit up, and then he shook his head. His mental power had already swept through the mutated dog's body, and the injury was not serious. Along the way, Wang Mingyang knew very well that Zhu Bai and Tang Bao had not yet broken through the first level. Even if Zhu Bai seemed to have some ability to strengthen attacks, he still could not kill this second-level mutated golden retriever. Unless it shoots directly into the eye socket. With his newly awakened strength, being able to hurt second-level mutated creatures is already pretty good. "One more arrow!" Zhu Bai spoke calmly and drew the recurved bow again. This time, he did not rush to shoot. The injured second-level mutant golden retriever gave up chasing Wang Mingyang, bit off the arrow stuck in his body, exerted force on his feet, and rushed directly towards the three of them. Zhu Bai held his breath, his fingers suddenly loosened, and the arrow shot out again. The golden retriever was on guard, and when it had no time to take action, its head lowered slightly, and the arrow was directly nailed to its forehead, bringing up a smear of blood. Liu Chan secretly said a pity, waved his palm lightly, and his strong telepathy directly flew away the golden hair that rushed in front of him. Zhu Bai's eyes darkened, but he didn't expect that the arrow he thought would definitely hit was actually dodged by the big dog. "Don't feel bad, this is a second-level mutant dog." Zhu Bai and Tang Bao were stunned. At first, they thought this was just a first-level mutant dog that was larger than other mutant dogs, and they didn't even think about the second-level mutant dog. Until now, they have never encountered the so-called second-order mutant creature. Wang Mingyang finally finished cleaning up the low-level creatures. When he turned around, he saw the second-level mutated golden retriever getting up again. A giant metal blade quickly condensed in midair and slashed down at the golden retriever. The shrill barking of a dog rang out, and even though the second-level mutant golden hair dodged frantically, it was still split into two pieces by the giant blade. Bao Bao, hurry up and wash the floor. Wang Mingyang walked over calmly and nodded with satisfaction when he saw Zhu Bai and Tang Bao looking shocked. It was also appropriate to show off his strength a little and shock these two young men. Li Yuchan sighed helplessly, and his mental power was like tentacles, reaching directly towards the corpses of mutated creatures and zombies. After a while, crystal nuclei penetrated the eye sockets of those mutated creatures and flew back together. Seeing this scene, Zhu Bai's eyes lit up. They had gotten a few crystal nuclei before, but they had never seen so many crystal nuclei before. Wang Mingyang found the off-road vehicle wrapped in metal. The outer metal was stained with blood and there were several dents. Fortunately, it did not affect the vehicle inside. Turn all nearby metal into liquid, throw away the blood and dirt, and put them all into the mustard space. Get in the car, let's go to the building materials market. Wang Mingyang quickly started the vehicle, and there were scattered zombies surrounding him. The three of them quickly jumped into the car and sat down. Li Yuchan threw the crystal core to Wang Mingyang and put it away, spreading his mental power outward. The corpses blocking the road were pushed aside one after another to make way for the way forward. Wang Mingyang stepped on the accelerator, and the off-road vehicle roared and sped off in the direction it came from. Fortunately, the roadblocks had been cleared when we arrived, and after a few hours, many zombies gathered on the route. The two of them didn't talk nonsense, and cooperated tacitly. The off-road vehicle ran onto the elevated road again and sped towards the building materials market on the edge of Nanqing district. Boss Wang, you have more than one ability, right? After a while, Tang Bao finally couldn't help his curiosity and asked. Zhu Bai's eyes flickered. Although he was also very curious, he was more mature than Tang Bao and kept silent. Wang Mingyang chuckled and glanced at Li Yuchan. Haha, you Boss Wang is not an ordinary person. Take your time and see his magic. Li Yuchan understood instantly, smiled slightly, but didn't explain it clearly. Zhu Bai's heart moved slightly. During this period, Wang Mingyang's ability had already subverted his three views. The ability to control metal, the black line cutting the supermarket floor, the ability to collect materials and store them in space. Each item is extremely powerful, but according to the profound meaning of Li Daocheng's words, it is estimated that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Zhu Bai thought through all this and couldn't help but look extremely surprised. Then he reached out to hold down Tang Bao, who wanted to ask more questions, and slowly shook his head at him. Tang Bao was stunned for a moment, then he resisted his desire to continue asking and kept silent. The two grew up together, and Tang Bao always followed Zhu Bai's lead. He knew very well how smart Zhu Bai was. The off-road vehicle quickly drove onto another road, and Li Yuchan once again became a coolie. Through the windshield, he could see that whether there were zombies or abandoned vehicles in front of him, they all gave way 10 meters away. Half an hour later, a large factory building appeared in the field of vision of the four people in the distance. Following the road directly to the factory and warehouse area, Wang Mingyang's eyes lit up. In those tall and wide warehouses, building materials such as steel bars are piled everywhere, and there are many empty transport vehicles parked in place. After finding a random place to park the off-road vehicle, Wang Mingyang jumped out of the car. Bao Bao, you take Zhu Bai and Fatty to clean up the zombies, and I'll collect the things. Wang Mingyang gave instructions to the three of them, and walked towards a factory building. Li Yuchan nodded when he heard this, and led Zhu Bai and the others towards other warehouses, cleaning up the zombies first to avoid disturbing Wang Mingyang. Fat man, you can be the vanguard and see your strength. Li Yuchan also wanted to know what the fat man's abilities as described by Wang Mingyang were. The fat man didn't hesitate when he heard this, and stepped forward with a homemade long knife. Use this knife. You can throw that thing away. Wang Mingyang casually threw out a horizontal knife and thrust it straight in front of the three of them. The fat man's eyes lit up, he threw away the tatters in his hand, grabbed the horizontal knife, and pulled it out directly. He waved excitedly, and the fat man laughed with satisfaction. The fat man got a new weapon, with a bright smile on his face. When he saw the zombies attracted by the movement, he directly hit them. The oncoming zombies were directly hit and flew back at a faster speed, hitting several zombies behind them. The fat man stepped forward, slashed with his sword, and 2 heads flew up. Seeing that there were ordinary zombies coming around, Zhu Bai didn't even pick up the bow and arrow, he just stood with his hands behind his back. Li Yuchan raised his eyebrows and chose to watch. The fat man was besieged by more than a dozen zombies, but he was not afraid at all, and he opened and closed his sword widely. There was no plan, but he didn't dodge or defend himself. The zombies' black claws clawed at his body and couldn't even break his skin. The fat man's t-shirt was torn and stained with blood, but the horizontal knife in his hand chopped off the zombies' heads repeatedly. Not bad. Not long after he awakened his superpower, he already has this kind of combat power. Wang Mingyang finished collecting the metal building materials in the warehouse and walked to the 2 of them to watch the fat man's performance. Well, let's give it a try with that Gong Zhanyo. Li Yuchan nodded, remembering Gong Zhan's Vajra body. It's different. Gong Zhan's King Kong body is stronger, and he will probably develop other abilities later on. Fat Man's superpowers are mainly to strengthen his own strength and defense. The upper limit is very high, but the method is much simpler. Wang Mingyang shook his head and made a simple and clear analysis. It doesn't matter if you use a single method, there are still us after all. Li Yuchan chuckled. Fatty's ability is simply a perfect front row human shield. It just so happens that the team lacks a real front rower. Well, the combination of Fatty and Xiaobai is quite suitable. No wonder you dared to go to that supermarket. Wang Mingyang also smiled and said, one close and one far away, the 2 of them cooperated well. The zombies outside the supermarket were all eaten by the meatball. We observed it for 2 days before we dared to take action. Zhu Bai said sheepishly that he had fewer arrows and relied mostly on fat men in battles. The fat man finally cleaned up more than 20 zombies, came back with bloodstains all over his body, and stood in front of the 3 of them, laughing. Well done, fat man. I'll arrange a good meal for you when we get back to your place. Wang Mingyang gave a thumbs up. Children need to be praised more to have more desire to make progress. Thank you, Boss Wang, just take care of yourself. The fat man touched the back of his head and smiled sheepishly. If you have enough control, you will definitely have enough control. Wang Mingyang laughed, patted him on the shoulder, and walked towards the warehouse. Li Yuchan and the other 2 didn't say much and continued to clean other warehouses. Everyone worked hard for another hour, and finally collected all the metal building materials here, and also harvested more than 30 crystal nuclei. Wang Mingyang asked the fat man to find some water to wash his body, and then found a set of clothes for him to change into. It was getting late, and after taking a short rest, the 4 of them drove the off-road vehicle straight to the Yunhu Villa area. After the sun went down, the off-road vehicle drove into the villa area, attracting frequent glances from the survivors. What happened in the courtyard of the mansion in the afternoon made everyone vaguely guess. So many people went up the mountain, and the explosions and roars were so loud, but no one came down after that. It's scary to think about it. The off-road vehicle climbed up the mountain and saw the gate collapsed in the distance. Wang Mingyang frowned and stepped on the accelerator to the bottom. Hearing the roar of the car, Su Yu and Mu Ningxue ran out of the living room and stood under the eaves. The off-road vehicle continued to drive into the courtyard, and they saw Su Yu and Mu Ningxue at a glance, and Wang Mingyang's slightly worried hearts calmed down. Although I have confidence in the 2 women, I am still a little worried about leaving them alone at home and facing so many possible survivors. Brother Mingyang! The off-road vehicle stopped, and Su Yu shouted with joy. What's going on? Someone is coming to cause trouble this afternoon? Wang Mingyang jumped out of the car, looked at the collapsed metal gate, and asked. Well, a group of survivors in the villa area below have been cleared by us. Mu Ningxue replied calmly, but the corners of her mouth were slightly raised. Well done! You are not injured, are you? Wang Mingyang smiled slightly and then expressed concern. It's okay, they're just a bunch of rookies. Su Yu shook his head and then looked at Zhu Bai and Tang Bao, who had just gotten out of the car. That's good, Lei Bao. You can introduce the new members to them. Wang Mingyang said hello and turned back to deal with the two doors. Liu Chan came forward with two shy older boys and introduced Su Yu and Mu Ningxue. Su Yu and Mu Ningxue also smiled when they heard that Wang Mingyang was the new member. Seeing that they were two beautiful sisters, Zhu Bai and Tang Bao looked even more shy and a little at a loss. Wang Mingyang used metal to control supernatural powers and re-erected the door. Then he looked around and saw that it was getting late. Without delay, he released piles of metal building materials from the mustard space. Metals all over the sky were floating in the air, and as Wang Mingyang's mental power flourished, they all turned into lumps of metallic liquid. With these metallic liquids, Wang Mingyang stepped to the edge of the courtyard wall. The metallic liquids condensed into sharp steel cones and plunged into the mountain outside the courtyard wall. Wang Mingyang's metal control power exploded with all his strength. The steel cone directly penetrated the mountain several meters deep. A steady stream of metal spread downwards along the mountain, constantly expanding the space occupied by the metal. Liu Chan and the others just looked at Wang Mingyang and walked around the entire courtyard of the mansion step by step. The entire courtyard wall was covered with thick metal. After laying the foundation, Wang Mingyang once again released a sky full of metal from the mustard space. Under his control, a metal dome gradually formed over the courtyard, enveloping the entire mansion courtyard. The entire dome was nearly 20 meters high. When the dome closed, the entire courtyard of the mansion was already dark. After thinking about it, Wang Mingyang left several winding vents on the courtyard wall to ensure that light would not leak out and outside things could not get in. Wang Mingyang returned to the gate again. The metal building materials turned into liquid and directly wrapped the two gates, forming a steel gate with a thickness of half a meter, connected to the metal dome covering the courtyard of the mansion. The entire courtyard was covered tightly with metal, and no light could shine through. Bao Bao, go turn on the light. After finishing everything, Wang Mingyang took a breath. 1/3 of the metal building materials collected in the evening had been consumed. However, in this way, even at night, the villa can still be brightly lit without worrying about attracting zombies or mutant creatures. Oops, I forgot to collect some diesel gasoline. Wang Mingyang slapped his forehead, and in the afternoon he only focused on collecting food and metal building materials, forgetting about this matter. It seems that tomorrow we have to collect some energy, gasoline or diesel. For now, no one cares about it, and their eyes are more on the food. After a while, when the level of superpowers increases, food is not the most scarce, but raw energy is the most scarce. Mutated beasts can also be eaten, and their meat is rich in energy, which can strengthen the body of the awakened person. This is something that survivors will discover one after another. Traveling to collect supplies requires relying on cars to travel long distances or to transport supplies. Except for a few people like Wang Mingyang who have space storage capabilities, energy consumption is also a major pain point. In this way, gasoline and diesel will become extremely precious. Liu Chan ran into the house as instructed. After a while, the lights in the villa and the courtyard were brightly lit, and the fountain that had stopped long ago surged up again. Everyone was a little uncomfortable for a while, as if they had returned to civilized society. With a new member in the team, Su Yu and Mu Ningxue once again prepared a large table of hot pot. Wang Mingyang collected a lot of hot pot base ingredients in the supermarket. Although most of the vegetables have gone bad, a small amount of cabbage, potatoes, sweet potatoes, etc. can still be stored for many days. Everyone sat around the dining table and enjoyed this rare meal together. Fatty Tang Bao whispered to Zhu Bai while eating that he really made the right choice to follow Wang Mingyang. This is my first meal, hot pot. Zhu Bai smiled bitterly. Hot pot was second, Wang Mingyang's miraculous mustard space was the focus. With this ability, it is really convenient to collect supplies. As long as you work hard these days and collect more in front of others, there will be no shortage of food later. The fat man, who was still a little skeptical at first, now put his mind at ease. After dinner, a room was assigned to Zhu Bai and Fatty, and everyone began their own practice. Why is the book missing? When Mu Ningxue returned to her room, she suddenly found that the 2 books on the bedside had disappeared, and she couldn't help but wonder. After pondering for a while, Mu Ningxue turned around and knocked on Wang Mingyang's door. "What's wrong?" Wang Mingyang held a book and asked curiously. "The 2 books you lent me are missing." Mu Ningxue was a little embarrassed. After all, they were books lent to her by Wang Mingyang, but she didn't expect them to be lost. It's okay. It should be that the borrowing time is up and it will come back automatically." Wang Mingyang was a little confused, and then he thought that it was time to manifest. "What did you say? If you borrow my book, it will be returned automatically?" Mu Ningxue said in shock. "Well, there's nothing strange about it. It's just a small ability, and it only has such a small effect." Wang Mingyang returned to the house. Wang Mingyang pretended to take out 2 books from his school bag, returned to the door and handed them to Mu Ningxue. "You should have finished reading those 2 books. I have found 2 more for you. The borrowing time is 7 days. The books will be returned automatically when the time is up." Mu Ningxue was rubbing 2 books related to temperature, and couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. "Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Don't be surprised if the book disappears next time." Wang Mingyang waved his hand and closed the door. He ignored Mu Ningxue, who was standing at the door, and went back to bed to read. "What an idiot!" After a while, Mu Ningxue shook her head, chuckled, turned around and returned to her room with 2 books in her arms. The next morning, everyone got up, washed up, and sat around the dining table to wait for breakfast. "Today, in addition to collecting food, we also need to collect some gasoline and diesel." Wang Mingyang ate the egg noodles brought by Su Yu and began to assign today's tasks. "Shu Bai, Fatty, and Su Yu, you 3 are coming out with me. Bao Bao, you and Mu Ningxue will stay here to look after the house and absorb the crystal core to increase your strength." The efficiency of low-level crystal cores was too slow for them. Wang Mingyang directly threw out 10 second-level crystal cores. At present, they needed to improve their strength as soon as possible, otherwise their advantage would soon be reduced. "Can you 2 drive?" Wang Mingyang immediately looked at Zhu Bai and Tang Bao. He needed his metal control ability to clear the way, and someone had to drive, so that it would be easier. "I won't." The fat man lowered his head and started eating the second bowl of noodles. Zhu Bai raised his hand and said, "I can." "Okay, then you drive." Wang Mingyang casually threw over 2 first-order crystal nuclei, 1 for each of Zhu Bai and Tang Bao. Both of them belonged to the strengthening system, and a first-order crystal core can basically break through to the first level. "Good." Zhu Bai took the crystal core, ate the egg noodles quickly, wiped his mouth and walked to the sofa to sit down, holding the crystal core and closing his eyes to absorb it. After the fat man showed off his second bowl, he stood up and ran to the kitchen with some embarrassment. With Su Yu and Mu Ningxue's stunned expressions, he started the third bowl. "The more the little fat guy eats, the stronger his abilities will be," Wang Mingyang said calmly. "Last night they just briefly introduced each other's powers, and the little fat man also restrained himself from eating hot pot. At this time, I was eating freely, and the 2 beauties were suddenly surprised. It wasn't until he finished the 8th bowl of noodles that the fat man burped with satisfaction. Even though Su Yu had already made a lot more noodles under Wang Mingyang's reminder, looking at the empty soup pot, he still couldn't help but his eyes twitching. Mu Ningxue silently gave a thumbs up. The little fat man was so good at eating, which aroused her appetite, and she ate a whole bowl of noodles. Sure enough, you still have to rush to eat to make it delicious. Seeing other people feasting makes me drool. After breakfast, the little fat man volunteered to wash the dishes, and Su Yu was happy to be free. Several people were sitting on the sofa, looking at the map Wang Mingyang found from somewhere, and discussing the direction of today's action. Zhu Bai on the side felt a surge of breath and his eyes suddenly opened. The first level superpower achievement is achieved. It's the first level, but unfortunately it's not enough. Wang Mingyang nodded, and then threw 5 more first-order crystal nuclei over. "Whenever you hit a bottleneck, tell me directly." Zhu Bai and Tang Bao both had good reputations in their previous lives, and Wang Mingyang had personally seen them risking their lives to save others. So at this moment I can rest assured that the two of them can improve their strength, and use both kindness and power to conquer people's hearts. Thank you, boss. Zhubai stood up and bowed, but his eyes were very calm. You're welcome, your increased strength can bring more crystal nuclei. Wang Mingyang laughed dumbly, and the words Li Yuchan brought out gave him a sense of familiarity as a gangster. Oil and diesel will definitely be scarce resources in the future, so store some in advance to be prepared. However, I'm not sure where the oil depot is in Spring City. I can't help but collect it at the gas stations one by one. Wang Mingyang looked at the map spread on the coffee table and said helplessly. Huaxia Petroleum's oil depot is in Changpa Town, Taiping County. Huaxia Petroleum's oil depot is near the Dongqing District passenger terminal. There is an Army strategic oil depot in Songlin County in the north, but it must be controlled by the troops stationed there. Other larger oil depots are in Jingqing, Nanzhao City, and Minhe City. Fatty Tang Bao pointed to several locations on the map and said softly. Everyone looked surprised, but Zhu Bai looked calm. How do you know so clearly? Li Yuchan asked curiously. My grandfather is a senior executive of Huaxia Petroleum in Dian Province. My father is also a middle-level member of the system, and my uncle has opened more than 100 gas stations. The fat man said with a smile, with a proud look on his face, and then his eyes dimmed again. After the apocalypse, he never saw his relatives again. Everyone applauded silently. Unexpectedly, this little fat man was still a third-generation oil man. In this way, we actually have only two choices. One is the Changpa Town Oil Depot in Taiping County, and the other is the oil depot near the Eastern Passenger Terminal. Fat man, of these two oil depots, which one has the larger reserves? Wang Mingyang pondered for a moment, turned around and asked. The reserves of these two oil depots should be similar, but I don't know the specific amount. The fat man thought for a moment, and said, It's almost the same, one in the west and one in the east. Wang Mingyang murmured to himself, seeming to be thinking about where to go first. Zhu Bai hesitated for a moment, and raised his hand. I suggest you go to the oil depot near the Eastern Passenger Terminal first. Everyone looked at him after hearing this. Zhu Bai did not show any stage fright and pointed at the map and spoke calmly. The oil depot in Taiping County is closer to us. We only need to go through the tunnel under the lake. The oil depot near the Eastern Passenger Terminal is further away. The road must be very congested and there are many zombies. But Zhu Bai's finger moved from Taiping County in the west to Songlin County in the north, and tapped lightly. Taiping County is further away from the military region in the north. There is an oil depot in Songlin County. I believe they won't be able to get there for a while. I don't think anyone has any ideas or the ability to take away the oil at this moment. In this way, we will have time to collect oil from the Eastern Oil Depot first, and then go to Taiping County. The finger once again drew from the Eastern Passenger Terminal to Taiping County in the west. Wang Mingyang thought for a while, nodded, and stood up. There is no problem with this arrangement. I estimate that the military region may launch a rescue operation today, and the target will not be placed on the oil depot. The military area shelter will definitely accommodate a large number of survivors, and their primary target supplies should be food and the like. Everyone nodded after hearing this. After 2 days of collecting food, there would be no shortage of food in a short time. Zhu Bai raised his peaked cap and said, Actually, there is another advantage to choosing the Dongqing District Oil Depot. What's the benefit? Li Yuchan raised his eyebrows. This Zhu Bai really looked like a treasure boy. 2 kilometers away from the oil depot, there is a national grain reserve, which contains about 100,000 tons of grain and about 50,000 tons of edible oil. Zhu Bai tapped his finger on the map and looked up at Wang Mingyang. How many grain reserves are there in the entire Spring City? I don't know the specific numbers. I learned this information accidentally. But I believe there must be more than one. Zhu Bai responded. Okay, let's go to Dongqing District and collect all these things. Wang Mingyang took a deep breath and slapped the map to set the tone. The apocalypse is approaching, and if these supplies are not taken away by oneself, the military region will definitely search for the supplies. If there was only one, then he really had to consider whether to take them all. Although the Spring City military region shelter in the previous life was a bit dark, it also sheltered hundreds of thousands of survivors. The importance of food can be imagined. But since there is more than one grain depot, there is nothing to say, they must all be taken away. As the team expands in the future, food will also be important. After everyone's discussion, Fatty Tang Bao also advanced to the first level as he wished. Wang Mingyang also threw 5 first-level crystal cores over, which made the little fat man feel grateful. Xu Bai drove the off-road vehicle, and Wang Mingyang activated his metal control ability and slowly opened the metal dome. The early morning sunlight quickly shone into the courtyard, the off-road vehicle quickly drove out of the courtyard, and the metal gate closed again with a bang. Li Yuchan and Mu Ningxue watched the off-road vehicle disappear on the mountain road, turned back to the house, and began to absorb the crystal core. This time, Wang Mingyang didn't use a picture to keep his profile. The car was full of 4 people, so there was no need for it. The off-road vehicle drove up the East Third Ring Road, and Wang Mingyang cleared the way with ease. Anyway, he might pass by it often in the future, so he simply stepped up his efforts to widen the congested road. At 9 o'clock in the morning, while the off-road vehicle was still speeding on the elevated highway, Wang Mingyang suddenly caught a glimpse of thick smoke rising to the north of the city. "Xu Bai, stop for a moment!" Xu Bai heard this and quickly stepped on the brakes. Before the car stopped, Wang Mingyang opened the door and jumped out, standing directly on the roof of an abandoned car. The surrounding metal turned into a torrent, all converging at Wang Mingyang's feet, supporting him to climb upwards. It wasn't until a giant pillar of 100 meters was formed that it completely solidified and stopped. "Please clean up the zombies around you and wait for me to check the situation." Wang Mingyang's voice came from above. Su Yu, Zhu Bai and Fatty were already fighting with the zombies around them. Hundreds of steel arrows fell from the sky, all piled up next to Zhu Bai. Zhu Bai's eyes lit up. After being promoted to the first level, his bow and arrows were more lethal, but the number of arrows was 1 less. With Wang Mingyang's support, he can finally express himself to his fullest. Wang Mingyang stood high in the sky, found a pair of telescopes from the mustard space, put it on his face, and looked towards the north. In the field of vision, a dozen armed helicopters the size of mosquitoes were hovering in the sky. Some soldiers who looked like small black dots could be vaguely seen between the buildings, advancing layer by layer under the cover of armored vehicles. As expected, the military region took action. Wang Mingyang sighed softly and glanced towards the center of the city. This place is more than 30 kilometers away from the northern battlefield, and this telescope can clearly see objects about 10 kilometers away. Even if his eyes have been strengthened many times, he can't see clearly as far as 30 kilometers away. The rescue operation in the previous life also started today. Originally, Wang Mingyang thought that since Gongzhan had harvested so many crystal nuclei, the rescue would either be advanced or postponed. Unexpectedly, it arrived as scheduled. It seems that in the previous life, Gongzhan also harvested a large number of crystal nuclei in Yunnan University. Coupled with those ancient lotus seeds, his strength soared, thus facilitating the rescue operation. What Wang Mingyang didn't know was that Gongzhan did not get the ancient lotus seeds in this life, but the lotus roots left in the pond fell into Gongzhan's hands. Although not as powerful as lotus seeds, it should not be underestimated. At the forefront of the battlefield, Gongzhan, dressed in camouflage, held a rifle and stood at the forefront of the team, constantly shooting at the zombies coming towards him. Beside him, there were strengthened awakened warriors, all of them fearless of death. They all raised their rifles and cleared away the zombies indiscriminately. Behind them are rows of awakened soldiers from other departments. After undergoing an enhancement, the shooting accuracy of many soldiers has improved a lot, and the loss of bullets is actually less than expected. But there were too many zombies around, even if the army was advancing layer by layer along the highway. There was also support from air gunships, but the intensive gunfire still attracted zombies from all directions. The first row of enhanced warriors must not advance rashly and must maintain formation. The second row of elemental warriors should try to use the sustained group damage ability to retain at least 60% of their energy. Don't be greedy for merit. The logistics force comforts the survivors in a timely manner and takes them away from the battlefield without causing commotion, let alone impacting the formation of the front row soldiers. If any survivors disobey orders and attack the formation, they can be killed directly. I emphasize again that everything is focused on maintaining formation and advancing safely. Anyone who affects the situation of the battle will be killed directly. On an armored vehicle at the rear, Yi Jianfeng, wearing a combat uniform, kept shouting through a walkie-talkie, transmitting battlefield orders directly to the front. Even though he had expected this scene, Yi Jianfeng, as the commander of the entire army, still felt his scalp numb. There are only 7,000 or 8,000 surviving army soldiers in the 3 divisions of the entire military region, and a full 6,000 people have been used on this battlefield. There are only 4,000 to 5,000 soldiers who can actually go into combat. The rest of the personnel still need to provide logistics, be responsible for transporting ammunition, sorting out survivors, battlefield rescue, and other tasks. Just 10 minutes after entering the city to start the battle, nearly 100,000 zombies gathered nearby, and Yi Jianfeng felt like he was sweating all over his body. The entire city has a permanent population of more than 5 million, regardless of the number of possible survivors. There may be more than 4 million zombies alone, including those mutant creatures. For the first time, Yi Jianfeng felt so clearly that as a battlefield commander, the pressure on him was greater than a mountain. In this case, if the survivors are not sorted out, once they hit the formation of the front row warriors, hundreds of thousands of corpses will directly break through the gap, drowning them all like a torrent. By then, it is estimated that the entire Spring City will really be in dire straits.